The emergency room doors locked at exactly 11:47 p.m. 14 hours, that's how long Dr. Gracie Vasquez had been on her feet, and she could feel every minute of it in the burning ache behind her knees, the tight knot between her shoulder blades, the way her scrub pants stuck to her thighs with dried sweat, and God knows what else. The fluorescent lights hummed their familiar migraine-inducing frequency as she peeled off her latex gloves, the snap of rubber against skin so routine she barely heard it anymore. St. Michael's Hospital downtown never truly slept, but Tuesday nights in late September came close. The waiting room had finally emptied an hour ago. The last patient, a construction worker with a nail through his palm who'd cracked jokes the whole time she'd stitched him up, probably running on adrenaline and shock. Gracie had laughed at his stories, the way she always did, because that's what good doctors did. They made people feel human even when they were at their most vulnerable. Now the silence pressed against her eardrums like water pressure. She should have called an Uber. Should have waited in the bright safety of the hospital lobby with its security guards and cameras and the night shift nurses who knew her by name. Instead, Gracie pushed through the side exit, into the employee parking lot. Her keys already in her hand, pointed outward between her knuckles the way her grandmother had taught her. Old habits. Ruth Vasquez hadn't raised a fool. The September air hit her face like a cold cloth crisp, almost autumn, carrying the scent of rain that hadn't fallen yet. Gracie's 12-year-old Honda sat in its usual spot under the broken streetlight she'd reported to maintenance 6 times. The parking lot stretched before her, cracked asphalt gleaming with oil puddles that reflected the distant glow of the city. Empty. Quiet. Too quiet. Her physician's brain cataloged details automatically. Heart rate elevated, pupils dilating in the darkness, adrenaline beginning its slow creep into her bloodstream. The same diagnostic assessment she'd performed thousands of times on patients, now turned inward. She was afraid, though she couldn't articulate why. Then she heard it, a sound that didn't belong. Not the scuttle of rats in the dumpsters, or the distant wail of sirens. This was leather on concrete, footsteps, multiple sets, moving with purpose. Gracie's head snapped toward the east corner of the parking lot. 3 men emerged from behind a delivery truck, and even from 30 feet away, she could see they weren't hospital staff. Wrong clothes, too expensive, too coordinated. Black suits that probably cost more than her monthly rent. They moved like dancers, like soldiers, like predators who'd done this before. And they were following someone. The figure ahead of them walked with inhuman grace despite an obvious limp. Tall, over 6 feet, with shoulder-length black hair that caught the amber streetlight like oil on water. He wore a long coat that billowed behind him. And even injured, even outnumbered, he moved like violence contained in human form. Gracie's rational mind screamed at her. Not your problem. Get in the car. Drive away. Let someone else be the hero. But her body was already moving. 28 years old, and Gracie had never learned how to look away from suffering. It was her greatest strength as a doctor, and probably her fatal flaw as a human being. Ruth used to say it would get her killed someday, had begged her to develop thicker skin, to stop bringing the emergency room home in her heart. Hey! Gracie's voice cracked across the parking lot, sharp and commanding, the same tone she used when a patient was crashing and the interns were freezing up. This is hospital property. Security's already been called. It was a lie. Security was probably asleep in the front office, and her phone was buried in her bag. But her voice carried authority, and sometimes that was enough. The 3 men stopped, turned. The injured man, and Gracie could see now that he was injured, could see the dark stains spreading across his left side. The way he favored his right leg also turned. His eyes found hers across the distance. Even in the poor light, even from 30 feet away, Gracie saw them flash silver, not reflecting the streetlights. Actually glowing, like coins at the bottom of a moonlit well. Impossible, her medical training whispered. Trick of the light. Fatigue. You've been on shift too long. But then the injured man spoke, and his voice carried with unnatural clarity, as if he were standing right beside her. Run. Just that one word. Not a request. A command. An inevitability. The 3 men in suits smiled in perfect unison, and Gracie saw their teeth too white, too sharp, catching the light like polished bone. The middle one, blonde with a scar bisecting his left eyebrow, raised his hand. There was something in it. Something small and dark and The gunshot was shockingly loud in the empty parking lot, a flat crack that echoed off the hospital's brick walls and sent pigeons exploding from the rooftop in a panic of wings. Gracie's brain processed events in the fractured slow motion of crisis, the muzzle flash, the smell of cordant, the trajectory. She'd seen enough gunshot wounds to know ballistics, to understand vectors and velocity. The bullet was aimed at the injured man's chest, center mass, the shot of someone who'd done this before. Professional, efficient, lethal. And in that suspended moment between the flash and the impact, Gracie made a choice that defied every survival instinct she possessed. She moved, not away, not toward safety, not toward her car and the rational world of medical journals and student loans and her grandmother's Sunday dinners. She moved into the bullet's path. Her medical training cataloged the impact even as it happened. Entry point 2 inches below left clavicle. Trajectory through pectoralis major. Possible lung involvement. Definitely vascular compromise. The bullet felt like being punched by something moving at the speed of thought, not pain yet. That would come in 3, 2, 1. Gracie's knees hit the asphalt. She tasted copper and concrete. The night sky tilted sideways. And she had the distant, clinical thought that she was going into shock, that her blood pressure was dropping, that she had maybe 4 minutes before consciousness failed. Then there were hands on her, impossibly cold hands, strong enough to lift her like she weighed nothing at all. The injured man's face filled her vision, and up close, she could see he wasn't human. Couldn't be. The silver eyes were real, and behind the dark fall of his hair, his features were too perfect, too symmetrical, like a statue carved by someone who understood human beauty, but had never quite achieved it. "You fool," he said, and his voice held centuries of weariness. "You beautiful, impossible fool. Why would you do that?" Gracie tried to answer, tried to explain about the Hippocratic Oath, and Ruth's insistence that you always helped when you could, and the simple fact that she'd seen someone about to die and her body had moved before her brain could stop it. But her tongue was thick, and the parking lot was growing dark at the edges, and all she managed was, "Doctor, I'm a doctor." "You're dying," he corrected. And for the first time in her life, Gracie heard what grief sounded like when it came from something that had lived long enough to perfect it. "And I cannot let that happen. Not after this. Not after you." The last thing Gracie saw before darkness took her was the man's face descending toward her neck, his mouth opening to reveal fangs that were definitely impossibly real. The last thing she heard was the sound of screaming, not hers, but the 3 men in suits, as something ancient and terrible stopped pretending to be injured and showed them what rage looked like when you had eternity to perfect it. The last thing she felt was cold fire pouring into her veins, rewriting everything she'd ever been. And then there was nothing but darkness, and the distant sound of her heart beating its last human rhythm. Chapter 1. What Remains. Gracie woke to the smell of old books and copper. Her physician's brain tried to catalog the sensory input, the way it always did upon waking. Visual stimuli processing, dim lighting, stone walls, Gothic architecture. Auditory input, complete silence. No. Ambient city. Noise. Olfactory data. Leather. Parchment. Blood. Blood. Her eyes snapped open fully. She was lying on something soft, a bed, she realized, with sheets that felt like silk against her skin. The room around her belonged in a European castle, all vaulted ceilings and leaded glass windows and furniture that looked genuinely antique rather than reproduction. Candles burned in wall sconces, their flames unnaturally steady, casting shadows that didn't quite move the way shadows should. Gracie sat up, and the movement was wrong. Too fast. Too fluid. No morning stiffness. No ache in her lower back from sleeping in an unfamiliar position. She looked down at herself and found she was wearing a white cotton nightgown that definitely wasn't hers, and her left shoulder. Her hand flew to the spot below her clavicle where the bullet had entered. She'd felt it, remembered the impact, knew with medical certainty that she'd been shot. But under the soft fabric, her skin was smooth, unmarked. Not even a scar. "Retrograde healing," a voice said, from the shadows near the window. "One of the more convenient aspects of the transformation. All previous injuries erase themselves, as the change completes. You'll find your old scars gone as well." Gracie's head whipped toward the voice with speed that made the room blur. The man from the parking lot stepped into the candlelight, and now that she wasn't bleeding out, she could actually see him clearly. He was devastating. Not handsome in the conventional sense, his features were too sharp for that, too predatory, with high cheekbones that cast their own shadows and a mouth that looked like it had forgotten how to smile decades ago. His black hair was pulled back now, revealing ears that came to subtle points. He wore dark slacks and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, exposing forearms corded with lean muscle and traced with scars that looked like they'd been made by claws. But it was his eyes that held her, those impossible silver eyes that seemed to glow with their own inner light. "I'm hallucinating," Gracie said, and her voice came out wrong too, clearer, each word distinct and sharp-edged. "Oxygen deprivation to the brain. I'm actually dying in that parking lot, and this is my neurons firing random patterns as they shut down." "A rational conclusion," the man said, moving closer with that liquid grace she remembered. "If you were still human. But you're not. Not anymore. I'm sorry." The words hit her like a second bullet. "What did you do to me?" Gracie demanded. And she was standing now, though she didn't remember moving, didn't remember her feet touching the cold stone floor. "In the parking lot. Before I passed out. Your mouth." "Ah, I turned you," he said simply. "It was that or watch you die in approximately 3 minutes from hypovolemic shock and tension pneumothorax. The bullet nicked your subclavian artery and collapsed your left lung. Even if I'd gotten you inside to your emergency room, your chances of survival were less than 30%. He recited the medical details with clinical precision, and Gracie's brain latched onto the familiar terminology like a drowning person grabbing a rope. "You can't just turn someone," she said, knowing even as she spoke that she was arguing against evidence her own body was providing. "Vampires aren't real. There has to be a rational explanation." "There is," he interrupted, and his voice carried the weight of someone who'd had this conversation before and found it exhausting. "The rational explanation is that your species' understanding of biology is incomplete. That there are older forms of life, older ways of being, that predate your medical journals by millennia. That I am vampire, have been for 473 years, and that as of approximately 6 hours ago, so are you." The room tilted. Gracie sat back down on the bed, not because she chose to, but because her legs simply stopped supporting her. "My name is Dorian Thorne," the man continued, his tone softening marginally. "I was king of the Eastern Territories, which encompasses everything from the Atlantic coast to the Mississippi River. And you, Doctor Gracie Vasquez, just saved my life at the cost of your own humanity." "How do you know my name?" Gracie whispered. He gestured toward the nightstand, where her hospital ID badge lay next to her phone and keys. "I went through your belongings. I needed to know who you were, who I'd condemned to this." The weight in that last word, condemned, sent a chill through Gracie that had nothing to do with temperature. "Those men in the parking lot," she said, forcing her mind to work, to process, to do what it did best, solve problems. "They were trying to kill you. Why?" "Because vampire politics are Byzantine and brutal, and I made enemies when I refused to sanction territory expansion into human population centers," Dorian said, moving to lean against the window frame. "The 3 hunters you saw were sent by Victor Cross, a rival who believes our kind should stop hiding and simply take what we want from humanity. He's been trying to assassinate me for 2 decades. But you're the king," Gracie said. "Don't you have guards? Protection?" Something that might have been a smile ghosted across Dorian's face. "I dismissed them for the evening. I was meeting someone I thought I could trust, receiving information about Victor's plans. It was a trap. The informant was one of Victor's people, and I walked right into it like a fool." "You're 473 years old, and you fell for a trap," Gracie heard herself say. And despite everything, the impossibility, the terror, the complete dissolution of her understanding of reality, she felt a flicker of the same exasperation she felt when interns made obviously stupid mistakes. This time, Dorian definitely smiled. "I appreciate your priorities, Doctor. Yes, I made an error in judgment, pride perhaps. I've been king for so long that I forgot I could still be outmaneuvered." "Were you actually injured?" Gracie asked. "In the parking lot, you were limping, bleeding. Silver knife to the femoral. Dorian said, touching his left thigh. It was real enough, and it would have slowed me down significantly. Silver disrupts our healing, burns us from the inside out. I would have survived the knife wound eventually, but the bullet? He met her eyes. That was blessed silver. Straight to the heart. That would have been the end of King Dorian Thorne. Blessed? Gracie repeated. You mean like religious blessing? Faith has power, Dorian said quietly. Especially faith wielded with conviction. A blessed bullet fired by someone who truly believes in what they're doing. That can kill even the oldest of us. Gracie's hands were shaking. She clasped them together in her lap, felt the tremor, the way her skin was too cold, the way her chest felt wrong because her heart was beating too slowly, maybe once every 4 seconds instead of the normal rhythm she'd lived with for 28 years. I want to go home, she whispered. I want to see my grandmother. I want to wake up from this. Dorian crossed the room and, with surprising gentleness, knelt before her. Up close, she could see the tiny lines around his eyes, proof that he'd been human once, that he'd smiled enough in his mortal life to earn crow's feet. I know, he said, and I will help you navigate this, teach you everything you need to know, show you how to survive what you've become. But Gracie, and you need to hear this, you cannot go home. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Why not? Because you are 3 hours old as a vampire, and you have no control. Your strength is 10 times what it was. Your speed could carry you across this room in the blink of an eye. Your senses are so heightened that if I let you walk outside right now, the sound of traffic would deafen you and the smell of humanity would drive you into a feeding frenzy. He paused. And your grandmother Ruth, 73 years old with type 2 diabetes and mild congestive heart failure, would be in grave danger from you. The medical details about Ruth, her age, her conditions, they were exactly right. Gracie stared at this impossible man who knew impossible things. How? Your phone, Dorian said apologetically. I read your text messages. Ruth sends you Bible verses every morning and asks if you've eaten. You send her pictures of your lunch and lie about getting enough sleep. His expression softened. She loves you very much. And I swear to you, Gracie Vasquez, I will do everything in my power to ensure you can return to her safely. But that will take time, training, and control you don't yet possess. A sound broke from Gracie's throat, half sob, half laugh. This is insane. 24 hours ago, my biggest problem was medical school debt and whether I should adopt that cat from the shelter. Now I'm a vampire who might kill her grandmother, and I'm sitting in a castle with a 400-year-old king who reads text messages. For what it's worth, Dorian said, standing and offering her his hand. You should adopt the cat. His name is Gerald, he's 7 years old, and according to your messages with your friend Maya, he's already chosen you. Cats are excellent companions for vampires. They don't judge our predatory nature. Gracie looked at his offered hand, pale, elegant, tipped with nails that looked normal but probably weren't. Everything about this was impossible. Everything about this violated every law of biology she'd spent 8 years studying. But she'd felt the bullet enter her chest. She'd felt herself dying. And she'd woken up here, healed, changed, with a heartbeat that moved like cold molasses and senses that kept trying to count the individual threads in the silk sheets beneath her. Evidence-based medicine, Ruth always said, meant trusting what you could observe and measure. Gracie took his hand. His skin was cold as marble and strong as steel, and when he pulled her to her feet, she felt the casual ease with which he could crush every bone in her hand if he chose to. What happens now? She asked. Dorian's expression was grave. Now I teach you how to survive, how to feed without killing, how to move through the human world without exposing what you are, how to defend yourself, because Victor Cross knows what I did, and he will come for you to punish me. I didn't ask for any of this, Gracie said. And finally, the tears came hot and fast and impossible because didn't vampires drink blood? How could she still cry? I know, Dorian said. And I will carry that guilt until the sun finally takes me. You saved my life, Gracie. You stepped into a bullet meant for me without hesitation, without knowing who or what I was. No one has done that for me in 4 centuries. He reached up, carefully, and wiped a tear from her cheek with his thumb. So I will burn this world down before I let anything happen to you. That is my oath, As the king you made yourself vulnerable to save. Gracie looked into those silver eyes and saw he meant every word. Outside the window, dawn was beginning to lighten the sky. Gracie felt the sun approaching like a weight on her bones, like gravity increasing. You should sleep, Dorian said, noticing her reaction. The day sleep is not optional, especially for young vampires. Your body needs time to adjust, to complete the cellular changes. Will you stay? Gracie asked, hating how small her voice sounded. I don't want to be alone when I sleep. What if I don't wake up? You will wake, Dorian assured her. But yes, I'll stay, you have my word. Gracie lay back down on the silk sheets, and Dorian settled into a chair beside the bed, his posture somehow both relaxed and vigilant. As the sun crested the horizon somewhere beyond the stone walls, Gracie felt consciousness slipping away like water through her fingers. Her last coherent thought was that she'd been right about one thing. Her life as she'd known it was over. But maybe, possibly, what came next didn't have to be a nightmare. Maybe it could be something else entirely. Chapter 2. First Lessons. Gracie woke to darkness and hunger. Not the familiar rumble of an empty stomach or the light-headed sensation of skipping lunch during a long shift. This was something primordial, something that lived in her bones and sang through her veins like electricity through copper wire. Every cell in her body was screaming for something she couldn't name, something red and warm and blood. Her eyes snapped open, and the room resolved with perfect clarity despite the absence of light. She could see everything: the grain in the wooden beams overhead, the individual threads in the tapestry on the far wall, the dust motes suspended in the air like tiny planets in a dark universe. Dorian was still in the chair beside her bed, perfectly motionless in a way that living things shouldn't be. His eyes were closed, but Gracie knew somehow that he wasn't truly sleeping. Vampires didn't sleep the way humans did. This was something else, a shutting down, a conservation of energy during the deadly hours when the sun ruled the sky. Your heart rate just increased, Dorian said without opening his eyes. And I can smell the adrenaline spike. You're experiencing the first true hunger. How bad is it? I feel like I haven't eaten in days, Gracie admitted. Sitting up, the movement was still too fast, too smooth, and she had to consciously slow herself down. But it's not food I want. It's blood, Dorian finished, opening his eyes. In the darkness, they glowed like silver coins at the bottom of a well. The foundation of what we are. The vampire virus, and yes, it is a virus. An ancient retrovirus that rewrites human DNA, requires fresh blood to sustain the accelerated cellular regeneration. Without it, you'll grow weak, then mad, then eventually violent. He stood with that fluid grace that Gracie was beginning to recognize as distinctly non-human. Come, I'll teach you to feed. But first, you need to understand what you're doing and why. Gracie followed him out of the bedroom and through a corridor that belonged in a museum. Stone walls, genuine medieval architecture, paintings that looked old enough to be priceless. Her new senses cataloged everything with overwhelming detail: the smell of old stone and older wood, the sound of her bare feet on cold floor, the taste of dust in the air that she could somehow perceive without opening her mouth. Where are we? She asked. My home, Dorian replied. Thornwood Estate, about 40 miles north of the city. The building is genuinely 15th century. I had it transported from France stone by stone in 1847 and reconstructed here. It's registered as a historical property, which means tourists come through on Saturdays, completely unaware that actual vampires live in the East Wing. He led her down a spiral staircase, their footsteps echoing in the enclosed space. The property sits on 200 acres, fully walled, with security that would make a military installation envious. You're safe here, Gracie. Victor cannot reach you within these walls. But I can't stay here forever, Gracie said. No, Dorian agreed, pushing open a heavy wooden door. You can't. But you'll stay here until you have control. Until you can walk among humans without wanting to tear open their throats. That could take weeks or months, depending on your willpower and discipline. They entered a room that looked like a medical facility transplanted into a Gothic castle. Stainless steel equipment, refrigeration units, monitoring devices, and Gracie's breath caught bags of blood hanging on IV stands like a hospital blood bank. You kept my professional equipment, she said, noting the crash cart in the corner, the defibrillator, the intubation supplies. I acquired them, Dorian corrected. After I read your credentials, Johns Hopkins undergraduate, Stanford Medical School, top of your class in emergency medicine, I realized that your skills are valuable. Vampire physicians are extraordinarily rare. Most of us were turned before modern medicine existed, and our kind rarely pursues formal education once turned. You're unique, Gracie. Your knowledge could save vampire lives that would otherwise be lost. He moved to one of the refrigeration units and removed a blood bag, holding it up to the light. Typo negative, universal donor. I maintain a significant supply, acquired legally through a shell corporation that operates blood donation centers. No humans are harmed, no blood is stolen. Everything is obtained through proper channels. Gracie stared at the blood bag, feeling her fangs when had those descended, pressing against her lower lip. The hunger was intensifying, making her hands shake. I don't know if I can do this, she whispered. Dorian set the blood bag on a steel table between them. Your body is screaming for it. Every instinct you now possess is telling you to tear that bag open and drain it. But you're going to learn control first, because control is the difference between a vampire and a monster. He pulled out a scalpel from a surgical tray. Gracie recognized it as a Hashon-0 blade, the kind used for deep incisions, and before she could process what he was doing, he drew it across his own palm. Dark blood welled up, and the smell hit Gracie like a physical force. She lunged forward without thinking, her body moving with that impossible speed, reaching for his hand, for the blood, for... Dorian caught her wrist with his other hand, stopping her completely despite her momentum. His grip was gentle but absolutely immovable, like trying to push through a steel beam. Stop, he said calmly. Breathe. You don't need to breathe. But the action helps center the mind. Do it. Gracie dragged air into lungs that no longer required it, felt her chest rise and fall in the ancient rhythm of living things. The hunger didn't diminish, but the frantic edge receded slightly. Good, Dorian said. Now look at my hand, really look. Gracie forced herself to focus. The cut was already healing, the edges knitting together with visible speed. Within 30 seconds, the wound had sealed completely, leaving only a trace of blood on his palm. We heal, Dorian explained, releasing her wrist. Rapidly, from almost any injury that doesn't involve silver, fire, or decapitation. Which means this, he made another cut, deeper this time, is temporary discomfort in service of your education. This time, Gracie was ready for the smell. She gripped the edge of the steel table hard enough to dent the metal, but she didn't move. Better, Dorian said, with something that might have been approval. The hunger never truly goes away, Gracie. Even after 400 years, I still feel it. But you learn to master it, to channel it, to control when and how you feed. You become the ruler of your appetites rather than their slave. He wiped the blood from his palm onto a gauze pad and held it out to her. Take it. Smell it. Let yourself experience the hunger fully while maintaining control. Gracie's hand trembled as she took the gauze. The moment it touched her skin, the world narrowed to that single point of sensation. The blood was still warm, still carried the echo of life, and every predatory instinct she now possessed roared at her to consume it. But she held still, counted to 10, breathed unnecessarily, and slowly, carefully, set the gauze back down on the table. I did it, she whispered. You did, Dorian confirmed. And that first moment of control is the foundation everything else will be built on. You proved you're stronger than the hunger. Now we can teach you to actually feed. He handed her the blood bag from earlier. This is already dead, no heartbeat, no living cells, just preserved hemoglobin and plasma. It will sustain you, provide the nutrients the virus requires, but it's not the same as feeding from a living source. That's a lesson for later, when you have more control. Gracie took the bag with shaking hands. Do I just bite it? You could. But I'm going to teach you to feed properly, using the fangs that extended the moment you smelled fresh blood. Dorian moved behind her, positioning her hands on the blood bag. Feel the canines, they're hollow, designed to pierce and extract efficiently. When you bite into a viable source, they inject an anticoagulant and mild euphoric to keep the prey calm and compliant. Evolution refined us into perfect predators. His hands covered hers, guiding the bag toward her mouth. Don't fight what you are, Gracie. Accept it, master it, but don't deny it. The vampires who try to reject their nature entirely are the ones who eventually snap and become the monsters in human nightmares. Gracie let her fangs pierce the plastic, felt them sink in with an ease that was deeply disturbing. The blood flowed into her mouth, and, oh, it was better than anything she'd ever tasted. Better than Ruth's arroz con pollo on Christmas. Better than the expensive wine Maya had bought for her med school graduation. Better than the chocolate she used to hide in her locker during residency. The blood was warmth and satisfaction, and the ending of a need so profound she hadn't known it existed until it was being fulfilled. She drank, and didn't stop until the bag was empty. When she finally pulled away, she felt stronger, clearer. The constant background noise of hunger that had been screaming since she woke had quieted to a manageable whisper. "How do you feel?" Dorian asked. "Full," Gracie said. Then after a moment, horrified, "I just drank blood and enjoyed it." "You did," Dorian agreed without judgment. "You'll do it again tomorrow, and the day after that, and every day for the rest of your existence. The average vampire needs to feed once every 24 to 48 hours, depending on activity level and age. Newly turned vampires require more frequent feeding until their bodies stabilize." He handed her a cloth to wipe her mouth. "You'll learn to find beauty in what we are, Gracie. We're not demons or soulless creatures of evil, despite what human mythology claims. We're simply another form of life, adapted to a specific ecological niche. Apex predators, yes, but capable of reason, emotion, art, love, all the things that make existence worthwhile." Gracie looked down at the empty blood bag in her hands. "I'm a doctor. I spent my entire adult life learning to save lives, to preserve human health and dignity. Now I'm something that needs to consume human blood to survive. How do I reconcile that?" "The same way I did," Dorian said quietly. "By choosing how you feed, by establishing rules and limits, by recognizing that humans kill and consume other beings to survive too. The only difference is that you're now at the top of the food chain." He paused. "And by remembering that you didn't choose this, but you can choose who you become after it." A comfortable silence settled between them, broken only by the hum of the refrigeration units. "I need to call Ruth," Gracie said suddenly. "She'll be worried. I never miss our morning texts, and it's been, how long has it been?" 36 hours, Dorian said. "You were unconscious for 18 hours during the transformation, then slept through yesterday's daylight hours. It's now 9 p.m. on Thursday evening." Gracie's chest tightened. "She's probably called the hospital, filed a missing person report. She has anxiety this will be destroying her." "Which is why you cannot call her yet," Dorian said firmly. "Your voice has changed, Gracie. It's subtle, but she'll notice. And the moment she asks you direct questions about where you are and what happened, will you be able to lie to her convincingly? The grandmother who raised you, who knows every tell and vocal pattern you have?" He was right. And Gracie hated it. "I can text her," she said. "I can say there was an emergency at the hospital, that I'm covering shifts, that I'm fine but busy." "That would be wise," Dorian agreed. "But keep it brief, and don't engage in long conversations. The more you communicate, the more likely you'll make a mistake." Gracie pulled out her phone. It still had 47% battery somehow, and opened her messages. 32 texts from Ruth, progressing from casual concern to outright panic. 15 from Maya. 6 from the hospital admin. 3 from her landlord. Her old life, reaching through the screen, trying to pull her back to a world she no longer belonged to. She typed carefully, "Graham, I'm so sorry. Emergency at hospital, been covering back-to-back shifts. Phone almost dead. I'm safe and okay. We'll call soon. Love you so much." The response came within seconds. "Mija, you scared me half to death. Thank Jesus. You're okay. Please eat something and sleep. And charge your phone. I love you more than the stars." Gracie felt tears burning behind her eyes again. Vampire tears, apparently, were just as real as human ones. "She loves you very much," Dorian observed, reading over her shoulder without apology. "She's all I have," Gracie said. "My parents died when I was 6, car accident, and Ruth took me in without hesitation. She worked 2 jobs to put me through college, came to every graduation, every award ceremony. She's the reason I became a doctor. I wanted to help people the way she helped me. Then, we'll ensure you can return to her, Dorian said. It will take time and discipline, but I give you my word as king. You will see Ruth Vasquez again, and you will be in control enough not to pose any threat to her. Gracie looked up at him. This impossible creature who'd torn apart 3 trained killers to save her life after she'd saved his. Why are you doing this? You said yourself that turning someone carries consequences, that Victor will come after me. Wouldn't it be easier to just let me figure this out alone? Or, she swallowed hard, end me so I'm not a liability? Dorian's expression shifted to something ancient and sad. Do you know what the oldest law of vampire society is, Gracie? She shook her head. The law of blood debt, he said. If someone saves your life at the cost of their own, you become responsible for them in perpetuity. Not just for teaching them, but for protecting them, for ensuring their well-being, for treating their life as equal to your own. His silver eyes met hers. You took a blessed silver bullet to the chest for me. That creates a bond that supersedes politics, territory disputes, and personal convenience. You are mine to protect now, Gracie Vasquez. And I do not fail in my debts. The weight of those words settled over Gracie like a physical thing. What if I don't want to be yours to protect? She asked. What if I want independence, autonomy, the right to make my own choices? A genuine smile crossed Dorian's face, the first real one she'd seen. Then you're already thinking like a vampire, good. The ones who blindly accept authority are useless in the long run. He gestured toward the door. Come. There's more to show you. And the night is young. You have approximately 11 hours before dawn forces you back to sleep. And we need to make use of every minute. Gracie followed him back into the corridor, her mind racing with 1,000 questions. But one rose above the others, urgent and immediate. Dorian, she said, those men in the parking lot, the ones who shot me, did you kill them? He paused, his back to her, silhouetted against the candlelight from the wall sconces. Yes, he said simply. All 3. Quickly, and without mercy. They saw you die. Saw me turn you. And that knowledge could not be allowed to return to Victor. I'm sorry you had to be part of that violence, but I will not apologize for the act itself. Were they human? Gracie asked. Or vampire? Human, Dorian said, turning to face her. Vampire hunters, actually. Humans who know we exist and dedicate themselves to eradicating us. Usually they're zealots or people who've lost someone to a rogue vampire. Victor recruits them, trains them, uses them as disposable assets. Gracie processed this. 3 human men, dead, because she'd made a choice in a parking lot. I should feel guilty, she said slowly. I should be horrified. But all I feel is grateful that they can't hurt you again, that they can't tell anyone what I've become. Is that wrong? Am I already losing my humanity? Dorian closed the distance between them and placed both hands on her shoulders. Humanity isn't measured by how you feel about those who tried to kill you, Gracie. It's measured by how you treat those who are vulnerable, powerless, unable to defend themselves. Those 3 men were armed, trained, and attempting murder. You didn't kill them, I did, and I did it to protect both of us. That's not loss of humanity, that's survival. He released her shoulders and continued walking. But we'll revisit this conversation periodically, because the real danger isn't feeling relief at being safe. The real danger is when you start to enjoy the killing itself, when violence becomes entertainment rather than necessity. That's when vampires become the monsters humans fear. They ascended a different staircase, this one spiraling up rather than down. Gracie's new body took the steps effortlessly, no burning in her thighs or shortness of breath. It was strange, being this strong, this tireless. They emerged onto a rooftop terrace, and Gracie gasped. The night sky spread above them like black velvet scattered with diamonds, but it wasn't the stars that stole her breath, it was the way she could see them. Individual pinpoints of light that she could focus on one at a time, constellations that resolved with perfect clarity, the arm of the Milky Way visible despite the distant glow of the city. Your vision has enhanced, Dorian explained, leaning against the stone balustrade. Vampires see differently than humans. We can perceive into the infrared and ultraviolet spectrums. That's how we hunt in complete darkness, how we spot the subtle heat signatures that indicate living prey. Gracie looked at her hands and saw the faint glow of her own body heat, a dim radiance that clung to her skin like phosphorescence. We're cooler than humans, Dorian continued. Body temperature around 85 degrees Fahrenheit rather than 98.6. It's one of the tells that observant humans might notice we don't show up well on thermal cameras, and our skin always feels cold to the touch. What else should I know? Gracie asked. What other changes should I expect? Dorian was quiet for a moment, gazing out over the dark landscape of his estate. Your emotions will intensify. Everything you feel, you'll feel more deeply: love, rage, grief, joy. It's one of the reasons newly turned vampires are dangerous. They lack the emotional regulation that comes with experience. He turned to face her. You'll become possessive of people you care about, territorial. The vampire virus enhances certain primate behaviors: mate guarding, resource protection, hierarchical dominance. You'll need to learn to manage these impulses in social situations. Will I be able to go back to work? Gracie asked. To the hospital? Eventually, Dorian said. Night shifts only, obviously. And you'll need to feed before each shift to ensure you have absolute control around blood and human vulnerability. But yes, I see no reason why you couldn't return to medicine once you've mastered yourself. Hope flared in Gracie's chest. Really? You're too valuable to waste, Dorian said bluntly. Modern medical knowledge combined with vampire physiology could advance our understanding of both species significantly. I'd be a fool to keep you locked away from your calling. He checked his watch, an antique piece that probably cost more than Gracie's yearly salary had been. It's 10:30. We have time for one more lesson tonight, and this one is crucial. Physical training. You need to understand what your body can do now, and more importantly, what it can't do. Follow me. They descended back through the castle to a large open room that had clearly been converted into a training facility. Mats covered the floor, weapons lined the walls, everything from medieval swords to modern firearms, and in the center stood what looked like a reinforced steel dummy. Hit it, Dorian instructed. What? The training dummy. Hit it as hard as you can. Let's establish your baseline strength. Gracie approached the dummy cautiously. She'd never been athletic. Academics had been her focus, not sports. She drew back her fist and punched the steel torso with what felt like moderate force. The dummy went flying backward, crashed into the wall, and left a sizable dent in both the dummy and the stone. Oh my God, Gracie breathed. Approximately 8 times normal human strength, Dorian assessed, examining the damage, which is average for a newly turned vampire. As you age and feed regularly, that will increase. I can currently bench press around 4 tons. For reference, he reset the dummy. Now you understand why control is essential. A casual touch from you could shatter human bones. A moment of anger could kill someone you love with a simple shove. You need to learn to modulate every physical interaction, to consciously pull your punches in every moment of your existence among humans. For the next 2 hours, Dorian put Gracie through her paces. He taught her to walk without cracking floor tiles, to shake hands without breaking fingers, to close doors without tearing them from their hinges. Every mundane action required conscious thought and restraint. By midnight, Gracie was mentally exhausted despite her body's tireless energy. Enough for tonight, Dorian said, noting her fatigue. You've learned the basics. Tomorrow we'll begin combat training. You need to be able to defend yourself if Victor's people find you. As they walked back toward Gracie's quarters, she found herself asking, Do you have family? Other vampires you're close to? I have a clan, Dorian said. 37 vampires who swear fealty to me, who I'm responsible for protecting and governing. Some I've known for centuries, others I turned myself. You'll meet them soon. They're eager to know the woman who saved their king. And beyond the clan? Gracie pressed. Friends? Someone you care about? Dorian's expression became carefully neutral. There was someone, once, 200 years ago. She was turned by another vampire, came to my territory seeking protection. We were together for 60 years. He paused. She walked into the sun one morning, left a letter explaining that she couldn't bear eternity, that the weight of years had crushed something essential in her spirit. I'm sorry, Gracie said quietly. It taught me an important lesson, Dorian said. That immortality isn't freedom, it's weight. Every year you live, you accumulate more memories, more losses, More reasons to simply stop. The vampires who survive centuries are the ones who find purpose, who anchor themselves to something beyond mere existence. He stopped outside Gracie's door. Which is why I want you to promise me something. What? That if the wait ever becomes too much, if you reach a point where you're considering walking into the sun, you'll talk to me first. Give me a chance to help. To remind you why existence is worth the burden. His silver eyes were intense. Promise me, Gracie. I promise, she said, and meant it. Dorian nodded, satisfied. Sleep well, doctor. Tomorrow night, we begin your real education. Gracie entered her room and collapsed onto the silk sheets, still wearing the white nightgown. Her mind was spinning with everything she'd learned, everything she'd become. But as dawn approached and the day sleep pulled at her consciousness, her last thought was surprisingly hopeful. Maybe I can do this. Maybe I can learn to be both doctor and vampire. Maybe this isn't the end of everything, just a different beginning. Outside her window, the first light of dawn touched the horizon, and Gracie slept. Chapter 3. The Clan. 5 days had passed since Gracie woke up as something other than human. 5 nights of training, of learning to exist in a body that moved too fast and felt too much. 5 sunrises that pulled her into unconsciousness whether she was ready or not. 5 periods of waking darkness where she fed from sterile blood bags and practiced not crushing the delicate glassware. Dorian kept bringing her to test her control. On the 6th night, Gracie successfully held a wine glass for a full minute without shattering it. Progress, Dorian said from his position across the training room, and Gracie heard the genuine approval in his voice. 3 days ago, you couldn't hold one for 10 seconds. Your proprioception is adapting. Gracie set the glass down carefully on the table. Another test, not dropping it from too high, not placing it too hard. I'm still terrified I'll hurt someone. Yesterday I reached for a book and punched a hole through the shelf. Which is why we practice, Dorian said. He moved to the weapons wall and selected 2 wooden practice swords. But tonight, we add a new element. Sparring. You need to learn combat, Gracie. Victor's people won't wait for you to master wine glasses before they come. Gracie caught the sword he tossed to her. Her reflexes were getting better, the superhuman speed becoming more intuitive. The weapon felt like a toy in her hands, light as balsa wood despite being solid oak. I've never fought anyone in my life, she protested. I'm a doctor. I fix violence. I don't commit it. And now you're a vampire who needs to survive in a world where immortal beings occasionally try to kill each other over territorial disputes and political disagreements, Dorian countered, taking a fighting stance. Consider this an expansion of your medical education. Practical anatomy through applied force. He moved without warning, his practice sword whistling toward her ribs. Gracie's body reacted before her mind caught up. She blocked, the impact sending vibrations up her arms. And suddenly they were moving together through a deadly dance she didn't know the steps to. Dorian was faster, infinitely more experienced, pulling his strikes at the last moment so each blow that landed was educational rather than destructive. But Gracie was learning, her physician's knowledge of human anatomy, translating into understanding where to strike, where the vulnerable points were. Good, Dorian said as Gracie managed to block 3 strikes in succession. You're thinking like a doctor, seeing the body as a system with weak points and critical failures. Now think like a predator. Where would you bite? The question shifted something in Gracie's perspective. She stopped seeing Dorian as an opponent and started seeing him as prey. Throat, femoral artery, radial pulse points. Places where blood ran close to the surface, where fangs could pierce and drink. Her next strike went for his neck. Dorian blocked it easily, but smiled. There. That's the instinct you need to cultivate. The predator has always been in you, Gracie, you just never needed to access it before. He stepped back, lowering his sword. Enough for now. You're getting faster each night. In a few weeks, you might actually land a hit. Comforting, Gracie said dryly, setting her practice sword aside. Her arms weren't tired, vampire stamina was remarkable, but her mind was fatigued from the constant concentration. Dorian checked his antique watch. It's 11 p.m. Time for you to meet the clan. They've been patient, but they're eager to see the vampire who saved their king's life, and you need to understand the social structure you're now part of. Gracie's stomach, which no longer needed food but apparently still registered anxiety, twisted. What if they don't like me? What if they resent that you turned me? Some might, Dorian admitted. Vampire politics are complicated, and my choice to turn you without consulting the clan first was controversial. But you saved my life, which creates a debt that supersedes normal protocol. They'll respect that, even if they don't immediately accept you. He led her through the castle's winding corridors to a set of massive double doors that Gracie hadn't seen before. Carved wood, probably centuries old, with intricate designs that looked like family crests and territorial markers. The clan gathers here, Dorian explained. It's neutral ground, where grievances are aired and decisions are made collectively. As king, I have final authority, but I don't rule as a tyrant. These vampires are my family, not my servants. He pushed open the doors, and Gracie stepped into organized chaos. The room was vast, with vaulted ceilings and the same Gothic architecture as the rest of the castle. But instead of the empty museum-like quality of Dorian's private spaces, this room was alive with movement and sound, and the overwhelming presence of 37 vampires all turning to stare at her at once. Gracie froze. "Breathe," Dorian murmured beside her. "They're curious, not hostile. Let me introduce you properly." He raised his voice, and the room fell silent with preternatural speed. "Clan, I present Dr. Gracie Vasquez. 6 days ago, she stepped into a blessed silver bullet meant for my heart. She died saving my life, and by the law of blood debt, I turned her. She is now under my direct protection and carries the full weight of my authority as her sire." A woman emerged from the crowd, tall, with white blonde hair that fell to her waist and eyes that glowed amber instead of silver. She moved with a grace that made Dorian's fluid movements look clumsy by comparison. "So this is the human who was," the woman said, circling Gracie like a shark examining prey. "The emergency room doctor who played hero. Tell me, little newborn, did you know what he was when you took that bullet? Did you understand the creature you were saving?" "No," Gracie said, forcing herself to meet those predatory amber eyes. "I saw someone injured and in danger. I reacted the way I was trained to react, put myself between the patient and the threat. I didn't know vampires existed until I woke up as one." The woman smiled, revealing fangs. "Honest. I appreciate that." She extended a hand, pale, elegant, tipped with nails filed to points. "I'm Celine, Dorian's second in command. I've been with this clan for 214 years, and I've seen 3 kings. You're the first vampire I've met who was turned for altruism rather than desire or political convenience." Gracie shook Selene's hand carefully, hyper-aware of her still developing control. "I'm still learning what that means." "It means you're either incredibly stupid or genuinely noble," Selene said bluntly. "Time will tell which. But you have my respect for the act, if nothing else." Other vampires approached, each introduction a blur of names and ages and personalities. Lucas, a former soldier turned during the Civil War, now responsible for the clan's security. He had a scar across his throat from silver that had never fully healed, and he assessed Gracie with military precision. Ivy, barely 19 when she was turned in 1952, now forever frozen in bobby socks and rebellion. She was tiny but radiated danger, and her eyes held the kind of damage that came from decades of existence in a teenager's body. Theodore, ancient and formal, turned during the Renaissance. He spoke in careful, measured sentences and studied Gracie like she was a fascinating specimen. Zara, a former Olympic athlete, turned in 2010, still wearing workout clothes and radiating competitive energy. She immediately challenged Gracie to an arm wrestling match that Dorian intervened to prevent. The introductions continued until Gracie's head spun with names and faces. But one vampire stood apart from the others, watching from the shadows near the fireplace. He was young, couldn't have been more than 17 when turned, with dark skin, close-cropped hair, and eyes that held centuries despite his youthful face. He didn't approach, didn't speak, just watched Gracie with an intensity that made her vampire instincts prickle with awareness. "That's Isaiah," Selene said, noticing Gracie's attention. "He's complicated. Turned in 1847, same year this castle was reconstructed. He was a runaway slave who Dorian found dying in the woods after an attack by slave catchers. Isaiah doesn't talk much, but he sees everything. If you earn his trust, you'll have a powerful ally. If you don't," she shrugged. "He's patience personified, but also unforgiving of those who prove unworthy. Isaiah met Gracie's eyes across the room, and she saw the challenge there. He was testing her, measuring her, determining whether she deserved the protection Dorian had extended. Gracie held his gaze and nodded once acknowledgement without submission. After a long moment, Isaiah returned the nod and melted back into the shadows. "Well handled," Selene murmured. "Isaiah respects those who don't try too hard to win him over. You passed the first test." Dorian clapped his hands once, drawing the clan's attention. "Gracie will be training here for the foreseeable future, mastering control and learning our ways. I expect you all to assist in her education while respecting her autonomy. She's not a pet or a project, she's a vampire with full rights and the protection of blood debt. Anyone who harms her answers to me personally." The weight of his authority pressed against the room like atmospheric pressure. The clan bowed their heads in acknowledgement, not fear, Gracie realized, but respect. "Now," Dorian continued, "we have business to discuss. Victor has made a formal challenge to my territory, claiming that my weakness in being injured proves I'm unfit to rule. The council has demanded I appear before them in 3 weeks to defend my position." The room erupted in angry voices. Selene's eyes flashed dangerously. Victor staged an assassination and now uses its partial success as grounds for challenge? That's snake tactics even for him. "It's also legal under the old laws," Theodore said gravely. "A king who cannot defend himself from attack forfeits the right to rule. The council will support tradition unless Dorian can prove his strength." "Which I will," Dorian said calmly. "But it means we have 3 weeks to prepare, and Victor will likely send more assassins during that time to further weaken my position. Security protocols are now at maximum. No one travels alone. Everyone reports suspicious activity immediately." Lucas stepped forward. "What about the newborn?" "She's a liability, Dorian." "No offense," he added, glancing at Gracie. "But you're 6 days old and barely in control. If Victor's people come and you panic—" "She stays with me," Dorian interrupted. "Under constant supervision, until she's stable enough to defend herself. I won't hide her away like a shameful secret. The clan needs to see her, accept her, integrate her. I can help with training," Zara offered, "physical conditioning, reflexes, combat basics. If she's going to survive in our world, she needs to be more than just controlled, she needs to be dangerous." "I'll handle magical theory," Theodore said. "The girl should understand the virus that transformed her, the biological and mystical mechanisms that sustain her. Knowledge is its own form of power. And I'll teach her politics," Selene added. "She needs to understand the council, the territorial divisions, the alliances and feuds that define our world. Dorian's enemies will become her enemies, she should at least know their names and motivations." Gracie listened to them discuss her education like she was a student, being assigned tutors, and part of her bristled at the lack of agency. But another part, the part that had spent 8 years in medical school, accepting that she didn't know everything and needed teachers recognize the gift being offered. "Thank you," she said, her voice cutting through the planning. "All of you. I didn't ask for this existence, but I'm here now, and I want to learn. I want to be useful, to contribute something beyond being the vampire who got Dorian shot." Ivy laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "I like her. She's got spine. Most newborns are either terrified or arrogant. This one's practical." "She's a doctor," Dorian said with something that might have been pride. Practical is her default setting. The meeting continued for another hour, covering security arrangements, patrol schedules, and contingency plans if Victor's forces attacked Thornwood Estate directly. Gracie absorbed what she could, but much of the tactical discussion went over her head. She was a physician, not a military strategist. Finally, as the clan began to disperse, Isaiah approached. Up close, Gracie could see the scars that crisscrossed his forearms, old wounds that had healed with vampire efficiency but left their marks. He pulled out a phone and typed rapidly, then showed Gracie the screen. "You were a doctor. Did you treat everyone, regardless of who they were?" Gracie understood the question beneath the question. "Yes," she said. "Rich, poor, citizen, undocumented, criminal, saint. If they came through my emergency room doors, I treated them. That was my oath." Isaiah typed again. "Even people who hurt others, who deserved their injuries. Especially them," Gracie said. Because deciding who deserves medical care based on moral judgment is a path to atrocity. My job was to heal bodies, not judge souls. Isaiah studied her face for a long moment, then typed. Dorian saved my life when no one else would have. When I was considered property, not human, he gave me freedom and eternity. If you hurt him through stupidity or carelessness, I will end you regardless of blood debt. Do you understand? I understand, Gracie said, meeting his fierce gaze. And I respect your loyalty. If our positions were reversed, I'd say the same thing. Isaiah's expression softened fractionally. He typed, Good, then we'll get along. I'll teach you sign language properly. Texting is inefficient in combat situations. He walked away before Gracie could respond, leaving her slightly stunned. That went better than expected, Celine said, appearing at Gracie's elbow. Isaiah doesn't usually accept newborns that quickly. You must have said something right. I told him the truth, Gracie said. That'll do it. Celine gestured toward the door. Come on, little doctor. Let me show you something useful where we keep the good blood. She led Gracie through a different section of the castle, down into what appeared to be extensive cellars. But instead of wine racks, Gracie found herself in a state-of-the-art storage facility with medical-grade refrigeration and careful labeling systems. We don't just have O-negative, Celine explained, opening one of the units. We have every blood type, separated by age, quality, and special characteristics. Fresh blood from donors who consent and are compensated, rare types for special occasions, even synthetic blood that Theodore has been developing, though it tastes like cardboard. She pulled out a bag labeled A positive, dated 3 days ago. This is from a donor who'd just eaten a good meal: pasta, red wine, dark chocolate. You can taste it in the blood. Little luxuries matter when you're immortal. You can taste what they ate? Gracie asked, fascinated despite herself. You can taste everything about them, Celine said. Diet, health status, emotional state, even medications. It's how we avoid feeding from sick humans the blood tastes wrong. Your medical knowledge will actually help here. You'll be able to diagnose conditions just by tasting someone's blood. She handed Gracie the bag. Try this one. It's better than the sterile O-negative Dorian's been giving you. Gracie pierced the bag with her fangs, still a deeply weird sensation, and drank. Celine was right. She could taste pasta, could detect the tannins from wine, could sense the donor's contentment and good health. That's incredible, she breathed. That's survival, Celine corrected. In the old days, before blood banks and consensual donors, we had to be able to assess prey quickly. Is this human healthy enough to feed from without killing them? Are they diseased, drugged? The ones who couldn't tell often poisoned themselves or accidentally created blood bonds with inappropriate humans. Blood bonds? Gracie asked. Celine's expression became carefully neutral. A topic for another night. It's advanced material, and you're barely controlling basic hunger. Let's not complicate things yet. They spent another hour in the blood storage, Celine teaching Gracie the protocols: how much to take from each bag, how to rotate stock, how to request specific types if she wanted to experience different flavors. It was weirdly domestic, like being taught to shop for groceries by a roommate. When they finally emerged back into the main castle, dawn was beginning to approach. Gracie felt the pull, the way her body started preparing for day sleep whether she wanted it or not. You'll get used to it, Celine said, noting Gracie's fatigue. The day sleep is absolute for the first few months, but as you age, you'll gain some resistance. I can stay conscious for a few hours past dawn if necessary, though it's exhausting. They parted ways at Gracie's corridor, and Gracie returned to her room to find Dorian waiting, sitting in his usual chair with a leather-bound book. How was your first clan meeting? He asked without looking up from his reading. Overwhelming, Gracie admitted, collapsing onto the bed. But not as bad as I feared. They seem decent. More human than I expected. We are human, Dorian said, finally meeting her eyes. Or we were. The virus doesn't erase who we were, it just adds layers to what we are. Celine is still the scholar she was in her mortal life. Lucas still has a soldier's discipline. Ivy still carries teenage rebellion in her eternal 19 years. He set his book aside. And you're still a doctor, Gracie. That won't change. Your compassion, your dedication to healing, those are core to who you are. The vampirism just gives you new tools to express those qualities. I broke 3 more wine glasses today during control practice, Gracie said. I'm nowhere near ready to be around humans without supervision. How am I supposed to go back to being a doctor when I can't even hold a stethoscope without crushing it? By practicing every day until you can, Dorian said simply. By refusing to let the difficulty defeat you. By remembering that every vampire in that clan meeting tonight went through exactly what you're experiencing, and they all eventually mastered it. He stood and moved to the window, looking out at the approaching dawn. Celine shattered every glass object in the castle for her first month. Lucas accidentally broke a man's hand trying to shake it. Ivy bit her own tongue off 3 times learning to speak, without cutting herself on her fangs. You're actually progressing faster than most. Really? Gracie said hopefully. Really. You have the benefit of medical knowledge and conscious understanding of what your body is doing. Most vampires are turned in eras without that framework they learn through trial and error over decades. You're applying scientific method to supernatural transformation. He smiled. It's quite efficient, actually. The day sleep was pulling harder now, Gracie's eyelids growing heavy despite her desire to keep talking. Will you stay again? She asked, the question embarrassingly vulnerable. Until I sleep? Every day until you don't need me to, Dorian promised, settling back into his chair. That's part of the sire bond, Gracie. Your presence soothes me the way mine soothes you. It's biological, designed to keep newborn vampires close to their makers during the vulnerable early months. Is that all it is? Gracie asked, fighting to keep her eyes open. Just biology? Dorian was quiet for a long moment. No, he finally said. It's not just biology. You saved my life without knowing me, without any logical reason to do so. That kind of selfless courage is rare, Gracie, especially in a world, human or vampire, that increasingly values self-preservation above all else. I find myself drawn to you, to your humanity, even in undeath. Gracie wanted to respond, wanted to explore what he meant by drawn to you, but the day sleep was taking her down into darkness. Her last conscious thought was that Dorian's voice would be a good thing to fall asleep to every day for the foreseeable future. Then the sun crested the horizon, and Gracie knew nothing but black. Day 12 as a vampire. Gracie held the wine glass for 5 minutes without breaking it, then successfully set it down and picked it up again 3 times in a row. Excellent, Theodore said, making notes in his leather journal. Your proprioception has fully adapted. Now let's try something more delicate. He handed her an egg. Gracie stared at it in horror. You want me to hold an egg? I'm barely trusted with reinforced glassware. Precisely why we're doing this, Theodore said in his precise Renaissance-era accent. You cannot truly control your strength until you can cradle the most fragile objects without damage. Take it. Gracie accepted the egg with trembling hands, feeling its delicate shell, the slight warmth from Theodore's cold fingers. She cupped it gently, barely applying any pressure, terrified it would explode. Good, Theodore said. Now walk across the room with it, then back. Do not break it. It was the longest 30 seconds of Gracie's undead life. Every step felt precarious, every movement a potential disaster. But she made it across the room and back, the egg intact. I did it, she breathed. You did, Theodore agreed. Which means you're ready for the next phase. Interaction with living humans. Carefully controlled, of course, but necessary for your development. Gracie's stomach dropped. I'm not ready for that. You are, Dorian said, entering the training room. I wouldn't allow it otherwise. Tomorrow night, you're going to accompany me into the city. We'll visit a vampire-friendly establishment where humans and vampires coexist safely. You'll observe, learn the social dynamics, and practice control in a real-world setting. What if I lose control? Gracie asked. What if I hurt someone? Then I'll stop you before any real damage occurs, Dorian said calmly. But you won't lose control, Gracie. You've mastered the basics. Now you need exposure therapy, the same way medical students eventually have to interact with actual patients, instead of just studying textbooks. He was right, and Gracie knew it. She couldn't hide in the castle forever. Okay, she said, forcing confidence into her voice. Tomorrow night, I'm ready. Dorian smiled. Good. Because there's someone I want you to meet, another vampire doctor. She runs a clinic that treats both humans and vampires, and I think she could be an invaluable mentor for you." Hope flared in Gracie's chest. "Another vampire doctor?" "Dr. Amara Okonkwo," Dorian said. "Turned in 1923. Medical degree from 1955. She's one of the most skilled physicians in the vampire community, and she's agreed to evaluate you tomorrow night." Gracie felt tears prick her eyes, happy tears this time. The possibility of returning to medicine, of using her training again, suddenly felt real instead of like a distant dream. "Thank you," she whispered. "Don't thank me yet," Dorian said. "Amara doesn't suffer fools, and she'll test you rigorously. But if she accepts you as a student, you'll learn things about vampire physiology that most of us don't understand about ourselves." That night, Gracie practiced for hours holding eggs, manipulating delicate instruments, performing mock medical procedures on training dummies. By dawn, she'd successfully sutured a practice wound without tearing the synthetic skin, started an IV on her first attempt, and manipulated a scalpel with her old precision. She was getting her life back, piece by piece. Or building a new life, she wasn't sure which yet. But for the first time since waking up as a vampire, Gracie felt like maybe, just maybe, she could be both doctor and predator, both healer and hunter, both human and monster. Or perhaps, neither. Perhaps she could be something entirely new. Chapter 4, Blood and Bonds. Day 12 as a vampire. And Gracie could finally hold a wine glass without shattering it. The training room had become her second home over the past week and a half. Cold stone floors, weapons lining the walls, and countless broken objects marking her progress. Or lack thereof. But today was different. Today, the delicate crystal remained intact in her palm for a full 5 minutes. "Progress," Dorian said from across the room, and Gracie heard the genuine approval in his voice. 3 days ago, you couldn't manage 10 seconds. Gracie set the glass down with exaggerated care, watching it settle on the table without cracking, without leaving finger-shaped dents in the stem. Such a small victory, but it felt monumental. "I'm still terrified I'll hurt someone," she admitted. "Yesterday I reached for a book and punched a hole through the shelf." "Which is why we practice," Dorian said, moving to the weapons wall. He selected 2 wooden practice swords, their surfaces worn smooth from centuries of use. "But tonight we add a new element. You need to learn combat, Gracie. Victor's people won't wait for you to master wine glasses before they come." He tossed one of the swords to her. Gracie caught it, her reflexes were getting better, the superhuman speed becoming more intuitive. The weapon felt impossibly light in her hands, like holding a pencil instead of solid oak. "I've never fought anyone in my life," Gracie protested, testing the sword's weight. "I'm a doctor. I fix violence. I don't commit it. And now you're a vampire who needs to survive in a world where immortal beings occasionally try to kill each other over territorial disputes," Dorian countered, taking a fighting stance that looked like it came from a Renaissance fencing manual. "Consider this an expansion of your medical education. Practical anatomy through applied force." He moved without warning. The practice sword whistled toward her ribs with speed that should have been impossible to track. But Gracie's new eyes caught the movement, processed the trajectory, and her body reacted before her mind finished panicking. She blocked, the impact sending vibrations up her arms that would have broken human bones. Then they were moving together through a deadly dance she didn't know the steps to. Dorian was faster, infinitely more experienced. 473 years of muscle memory guiding every strike. He pulled his attacks at the last moment, so each blow that landed was educational rather than destructive. But Gracie was learning, her physician's knowledge of anatomy translating into understanding where to strike, where the vulnerable points were. "Good," Dorian said as Gracie managed to block 3 strikes in succession. "You're thinking like a doctor, seeing the body as a system with weak points and critical failures. Now think like a predator. Where would you bite?" The question shifted something in Gracie's perspective. She stopped seeing Dorian as an opponent and started seeing him as prey. Throat, where the carotid pulsed. Femoral artery in the thigh. Radial pulse points at the wrists, places where blood ran close to the surface, where fangs could pierce and drink, and her next strike went for his neck. Dorian blocked it easily, but he smiled. The expression transformed his usually severe face into something almost beautiful. There, he said. That's the instinct you need to cultivate. The predator has always been in you, Gracie, you just never needed to access it before. He stepped back, lowering his sword. Enough for now. You're getting faster each night. In a few weeks, you might actually land a hit. Comforting, Gracie said dryly, setting her practice sword aside. Her arms weren't tired, vampire stamina was remarkable, but her mind was fatigued from the constant concentration. Every movement required thought, calibration, conscious control to avoid destroying everything she touched. Dorian checked his antique pocket watch, the one that probably cost more than Gracie's entire medical school tuition. It's nearly midnight. The clan's gathering in the main hall. They're eager to meet you properly. Gracie's stomach, which no longer needed food but apparently still registered anxiety, twisted into knots. What if they don't like me? What if they resent that you turned me? Some might, Dorian admitted, his honesty both refreshing and terrifying. Vampire politics are complicated, and my choice to turn you without consulting the clan first was controversial. But you saved my life, which creates a debt that supersedes normal protocol. They'll respect that, even if they don't immediately accept you. He led her through the castle's winding corridors, past tapestries that looked genuinely medieval, and portraits of people who were probably still alive somewhere in the world. The walls held history, centuries of it, and Gracie felt the weight of stepping into something far older than her 28 years could comprehend. They stopped before massive double doors carved with intricate designs that looked like family crests and territorial markers. The clan gathers here, Dorian explained, his hand resting on the door handle. It's neutral ground, where grievances are aired and decisions are made collectively. As king, I have final authority, but I don't rule as a tyrant. These vampires are my family, not my servants. Family, Gracie repeated, tasting the word. She'd lost her parents at 6, had only Ruth left from her old life. The concept of belonging to something larger felt foreign and desperately appealing at the same time. Dorian pushed open the doors. The room beyond stole Gracie's breath, vast, with vaulted ceilings that disappeared into shadow and filled with vampires. 37 of them, Dorian had said. 37 immortal beings who all turned to stare at her at once with eyes that glowed silver, amber, gold, and colors that shouldn't exist. Gracie froze, every predatory instinct she'd been cultivating suddenly screaming danger. Breathe, Dorian murmured beside her, his hand settling on the small of her back. The touch was grounding, familiar. They're curious, not hostile. Let me introduce you properly. He raised his voice, and the room fell silent with preternatural speed. Clan. I present Dr. Gracie Vasquez. 12 days ago, she stepped into a blessed silver bullet, meant for my heart. She died saving my life, and by the law of blood debt, I turned her. She is now under my direct protection, and carries the full weight of my authority as her sire. The formal words hung in the air like a pronouncement from a court. A woman emerged from the crowd, tall, with white blonde hair that fell to her waist like a waterfall of moonlight. Her eyes glowed amber instead of silver, and she moved with grace that made Dorian's fluid movements look clumsy by comparison. This was a vampire who'd perfected the art of motion over centuries. So this is the human who was, the woman said, circling Gracie like a shark examining prey, the emergency room doctor who played hero. Tell me, little newborn, did you know what he was when you took that bullet? Did you understand the creature you were saving? Gracie forced herself to meet those predatory amber eyes, forced herself not to show fear, even though every cell in her body wanted to run. No, she said, keeping her voice steady. I saw someone injured and in danger. I reacted the way I was trained to react, put myself between the patient and the threat. I didn't know vampires existed until I woke up as one. The woman smiled, revealing fangs that looked sharper than Gracie's. Honest, I appreciate that. She extended a hand, pale, elegant, tipped with nails filed to points. I'm Selene, Dorian's second in command. I've been with this clan for 214 years, and I've seen 3 kings rise and fall. You're the first vampire I've met who was turned for altruism rather than desire or political convenience. Gracie shook Selene's hand carefully, hyper-aware of her still developing control. I'm still learning what that means. It means you're either incredibly stupid or genuinely noble, Selene said bluntly. Time will tell which, but you have my respect for the act, if nothing else. She turned to address the assembled vampires. The newborn saved our king's life. Whatever reservations we have about the circumstances of her turning, we owe her the courtesy of patience while she learns our ways. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. Not enthusiastic acceptance, Gracie noted, but not outright hostility either. It was a start. Other vampires approached, each introduction a blur of names and impossible ages. Lucas, a former Civil War soldier with a scar across his throat from silver that had never fully healed. He assessed Gracie with military precision and nodded once acknowledgement without warmth. Ivy, barely 19 when she was turned in 1952, now forever frozen in bobby socks and teenage rebellion. She was tiny but radiated danger like a live wire. Theodore, ancient and formal, turned during the Renaissance. He spoke in careful, measured sentences and studied Gracie like she was a fascinating specimen under a microscope. The introductions continued until Gracie's head spun with names and faces, and the overwhelming reality that she was now part of something vast and ancient, and completely outside her previous understanding of the world. But one vampire stood apart from the others, watching from the shadows near the massive stone fireplace. He was young, couldn't have been more than 17 when turned, with dark skin, close-cropped hair and eyes that held centuries despite his youthful face. He didn't approach, didn't speak, just watched Gracie with an intensity that made her vampire instincts prickle with awareness. "That's Isaiah," Celine said quietly, noticing Gracie's attention. "He's complicated. Turned in 1847, same year this castle was reconstructed. He was a runaway slave who Dorian found dying in the woods after an attack by slave catchers. Isaiah doesn't talk, can't. Actually, they cut out his tongue before Dorian found him, and vampire healing preserved the injury. But he sees everything, understands everything. If you earn his trust, you'll have a powerful ally." Gracie looked at Isaiah across the crowded room. He met her gaze steadily, and she saw the challenge there. He was testing her, measuring her, determining whether she deserved the protection Dorian had extended. She held his gaze and nodded once acknowledgement without presumption. After a long moment, Isaiah returned the nod. Something in the room shifted, a tension Gracie hadn't fully noticed releasing slightly. "Well handled," Celine murmured. "Isaiah respects those who don't try too hard. You passed the first test." The gathering continued for another hour, vampires approaching in small groups to introduce themselves or simply assess the newcomer who disrupted their king's carefully ordered existence. Gracie answered questions, accepted scrutiny, and tried desperately not to break anything with her still unpredictable strength. By the time the clan began to disperse, Gracie felt mentally exhausted despite her body's tireless energy. "You survived," Dorian said as they walked back toward Gracie's quarters. "That's more than many newborns manage at their first clan gathering. Selene liked you, which matters, and Isaiah acknowledged you, which is rare. They're your family," Gracie observed. "They are," Dorian agreed. "Chosen family, bound by shared existence and mutual protection. Some I've known for centuries, others for mere decades, but they're mine to protect, and I'm theirs to follow. That's the compact that holds clans together." They reached Gracie's door, and she hesitated before opening it. "Dorian," she said, "why do I feel calmer when you're near? Why does your presence make everything feel less overwhelming?" He was quiet for a moment, his silver eyes studying her face. "The sire bond," he finally said. "When a vampire turns a human, it creates a biological and mystical connection. You'll always be able to sense me, to find me if you need to, and my presence will soothe your newborn instincts the way a parent's voice soothes a frightened child." "Is that all it is?" Gracie asked. "Just vampire biology?" Dorian stepped closer, and Gracie caught his scent: old books, and something metallic and distinctly not human. "No," he said quietly. "It's not just biology. The sire bond creates the foundation, but what builds on that foundation is choice. And I choose to be here, Gracie, not because I have to, but because I want to." The words hung between them, heavy with implication. "I should sleep," Gracie said, though she didn't want to. Dawn was still hours away. "You should," Dorian agreed, but he didn't move. "But first, there's something you need to understand about the next few weeks." Victor will make his move soon, either another assassination attempt or a formal challenge before the council. When that happens, things will become dangerous. I need to know you can defend yourself. I'm trying, Gracie said. The training, the control exercises. I know, Dorian interrupted gently. And you're progressing faster than I expected. But I need you to promise me something, Gracie. If Victor's people come for you, if you're in danger and I'm not there, promise me you'll run. Don't try to fight. Don't try to be brave. Just run. And keep running until you reach someone from the clan. I'm not a coward, Gracie protested. I know, Dorian said again. That's what terrifies me. You stepped into a bullet for a stranger, Gracie. You have the instincts of a protector, not a survivor. But right now, survival is what matters. You're too new, too vulnerable. Promise me you'll run. Gracie looked into his silver eyes and saw genuine fear there. Fear for her. Fear of losing her. I promise, she said. Dorian nodded, satisfied. Good. Now sleep. Tomorrow night we continue your education. He turned to leave, but Gracie caught his hand. His skin was cold as marble, but the touch felt right somehow. Thank you, she said, for everything. For saving me, for teaching me, for not giving up on me when I broke everything I touched. Dorian's expression softened. You saved me first, Gracie. I'm simply returning the favor. Then he was gone, moving through the corridor with that supernatural silence, leaving Gracie alone with her thoughts and the approaching pull of day sleep. She lay down on silk sheets and closed her eyes, but sleep didn't come immediately. Her mind was too full of new faces, new names, new understanding of what her life, her existence had become. Somewhere in the castle, 37 vampires were settling into their own day sleep routines. Somewhere in the city, Ruth was probably worrying about her granddaughter who kept canceling their phone calls. Somewhere in the darkness, Victor was planning his next move. But here, in this moment, Gracie felt something she hadn't felt since waking up as a vampire. She felt like she might actually belong somewhere. The day sleep finally claimed her as dawn approached, pulling her down into darkness with Dorian's words echoing in her mind. I choose to be here because I want to. And Gracie realized, just before consciousness faded completely, that she was beginning to want him there too. Chapter 5. The City at Night. Day 15 as a vampire, and Dorian announced they were going into the city. Absolutely not, Gracie said, backing away from the elegant black dress he'd laid out on her bed. I'm not ready. I can barely hold a wine glass without breaking it, and you want me around actual living humans? You held an egg yesterday, Dorian reminded her, leaning against the doorframe with his arms crossed. For 3 minutes. Without cracking it. That's delicate enough to prove you have control. That was different. Eggs don't have heartbeats. Eggs don't smell like... Gracie stopped herself. But the damage was done. Like food, Dorian finished gently. Gracie, you're going to have to face this eventually. Hiding in the castle won't prepare you for the real world. And there's someone I want you to meet, another vampire physician who could be an invaluable mentor. That got Gracie's attention. Another vampire doctor? Dr. Amaro Conquo, Dorian said. Turned in 1923. Medical degree from 1955. She runs a clinic that treats both humans and vampires in the city. She's agreed to meet you tonight. Hope flared painfully in Gracie's chest. The possibility of returning to medicine, of using her training again, suddenly felt real instead of like a distant fantasy. What if I lose control? She asked quietly. Then I'll stop you before any harm occurs, Dorian said with absolute confidence. But you won't, Gracie. I've been watching you for 15 days. You have more discipline than vampires twice your age. Trust yourself the way I trust you. 20 minutes later, Gracie found herself in the back of a sleek black car, wearing the dress Dorian had selected, simple, elegant, dark enough not to show bloodstains if something went wrong. That last thought should have been horrifying, but vampire pragmatism was apparently contagious. Lucas drove, his military bearing evident even behind the wheel. Celine sat in the passenger seat, having insisted on accompanying them for additional security. Victor's people are watching, she'd said. The king doesn't travel without proper protection, newborn in tow or not. Gracie watched the city lights blur past the window, her enhanced vision picking out details that would have been invisible to her human eyes. A couple arguing on a street corner. A homeless man sleeping in a doorway, his breath visible in the September cold. A woman laughing into her phone, completely unaware that monsters were real. Overwhelming, Dorian asked beside her, his voice low enough that only vampire hearing would catch it. Everything's so loud, Gracie admitted. So bright. How do you filter it all out? Practice, Dorian said. And age. Eventually, you'll learn to focus selectively, to tune out the background noise of existence. But for now, if it becomes too much, tell me. We can leave any time. They pulled up to a building in the warehouse district, old brick, nondescript, the kind of place most people would walk past without noticing. But Gracie's vampire senses picked up the subtle tells: reinforced doors, cameras hidden in the eaves, and the faint hum of serious security systems. The sanctuary, Celine explained as they exited the car. Neutral ground. Vampires and select humans coexist here under strict rules. No feeding without consent, no violence, no exposure of our nature to unaware humans. Break the rules, and you're banned permanently. Break them badly enough, and you're executed. Gracie's throat went dry. Executed. We police our own, Dorian said, guiding her toward the entrance with a hand on her lower back. It's the only way to maintain secrecy and prevent hunters from wiping us out. The sanctuary exists because vampires like Amara enforce its rules absolutely. Lucas stayed with the car while Dorian, Celine, and Gracie entered through heavy doors that required both a keycard and what looked like biometric scanning. The security made TSA look casual. Inside, Gracie's senses were immediately overwhelmed. Music pulsed from somewhere deeper in the building: jazz, live instruments, a saxophone's wail that she could feel in her bones. The air smelled of perfume, alcohol, blood, and dozens of different human scents all mixing together. And there were people everywhere, some clearly vampire with their too perfect features and glowing eyes, others obviously human, and some that Gracie couldn't immediately categorize. Stay close, Dorian murmured, his hand moving from her back to her elbow. And remember, you're in control. Your hunger doesn't control you. They moved through the crowd, Celine leading the way with the confidence of someone who'd been here 1,000 times. Humans and vampires mingled freely, talking, laughing, some dancing to the jazz quartet on a small stage. Gracie saw a vampire woman feeding from a human man's wrist while he smiled dreamily, clearly consenting and enjoying the experience. Blood bonds, Celine said, noticing Gracie's stare. Some humans seek out vampires specifically for the feeding experience. The venom we inject creates euphoria, and some humans become enthusiastic donors. They climbed stairs to a quieter second level, away from the crowd and music. Here, the atmosphere shifted from nightclub to something more professional. They entered a room that looked like a doctor's office, transplanted into a vampire, sanctuary medical equipment, examination tables, and a woman who looked up from paperwork as they entered. Dr. Amara Okonkwo was stunning. Dark skin, silver eyes that marked her as vampire, and an air of competence that reminded Gracie of her best professors at Stanford. She wore scrubs, teal, practical, and a stethoscope hung around her neck like it actually belonged there. Dorian, Amara said, standing to shake his hand. It's been too long, and Selene, always a pleasure. Her eyes moved to Gracie. And this must be the newborn who saved the king's life. Dr. Gracie Vasquez, Johns Hopkins and Stanford. Impressive credentials. Thank you for meeting me, Gracie said, shaking Amara's offered hand carefully. Dorian said you might be willing to mentor me. That depends, Amara said, gesturing for them to sit. Why do you want to continue practicing medicine, Gracie? You're vampire now. You could pursue any career, any interest. Why return to a profession that will require you to be around vulnerable humans constantly? Gracie had been thinking about this question for days. Because being a doctor isn't what I do, it's who I am. I spent 8 years learning to heal, to diagnose, to help people in their most vulnerable moments. The vampire transformation didn't erase that knowledge or that calling. If anything, it enhanced it. How so? Amara asked, her expression neutral. I can smell disease now, Gracie said. Taste chemical imbalances in blood. Hear heartbeat irregularities from across a room. My diagnostic abilities have exponentially increased, even if my control is still developing. I could be a better doctor as a vampire than I ever was as a human if I can master the predatory instincts. Amara smiled for the first time. Good answer. Most newborns focus on what they've lost. You're focusing on what you've gained. She pulled out a tablet and began typing. I'll mentor you, but on certain conditions. First, you complete an intensive training program here at the sanctuary working with human patients under my direct supervision. You'll start with minor injuries and work up to more serious cases as you prove your control. I can do that, Gracie said immediately. Second, Amara continued, you study vampire physiology with me. Our medical needs are different from humans, and there are maybe 5 vampire physicians in North America who truly understand our biology. You'll need to master both human and vampire medicine if you want to be truly effective. I want that, Gracie said. I want to understand what I've become. Amara nodded approvingly. Third, and most importantly, you acknowledge that one day, you might encounter a patient you can't help without losing control. A trauma case with massive blood loss. Or someone whose fear triggers your predatory instincts so strongly that you can't function. If that happens, you walk away. You don't try to be a hero. You preserve your control even if it means letting someone else treat the patient. Can you accept that limitation? The question hurt, but Gracie understood the necessity. Yes, I can accept that. Then we have an agreement, Amara said, extending her hand again. Welcome to Vampire Medicine, Dr. Vasquez. Your first shift starts tomorrow night. Be here at 9 p.m. and bring your hunger under control before you arrive. They shook hands, and Gracie felt tears threatening. After 15 days of feeling like she'd lost everything, she was getting a piece of herself back. Thank you, she whispered. Amara's expression softened. Thank me after you've survived your first shift. Vampire medicine can be complicated. We heal from almost anything, which means when we come in injured, it's usually spectacular and requires creative treatment. They talked for another 30 minutes. Amara explaining the kinds of cases Gracie would encounter, the protocols for working with human patients, while vampire, the ethical considerations that made vampire medicine a minefield of potential disasters. Gracie absorbed every word, her medical training coming back online like a computer rebooting after a crash. Finally, Dorian stood. We should return. Gracie still adjusting to sensory overload, and the sanctuary on a Friday night can be intense even for experienced vampires. They said their goodbyes and descended back to the main floor. The crowd had grown larger, the music louder, and Gracie felt her control slipping slightly under the assault of so many heartbeats, so much living blood in one enclosed space. Focus on my voice, Dorian said, staying close. Count your breaths. You're doing fine. They were almost to the exit when someone stepped into their path. He was Vampire Silver Eyes, predatory Grace, but Gracie didn't recognize him from the clan. He smiled, showing too many teeth. King Dorian, the vampire said with exaggerated courtesy. And the famous newborn. Victor sends his regards. He's very interested in meeting Dr. Vasquez personally. Celine moved with liquid speed, positioning herself between the stranger and Gracie. Marcus, you're not welcome here. Leave now, or I'll have Amara ban you permanently. I'm simply delivering a message, Marcus said, his hands raised in mock innocence. Victor believes the king's attachment to his newborn represents a weakness. He's planning to challenge for territory within the month. Thought you should know. Threat delivered, Dorian said coldly. Now leave before I forget we're on neutral ground. Marcus laughed and melted back into the crowd, but his message hung in the air like poison. The drive back to Thornwood Estate was tense and silent. Chapter 6, First Blood. The attack came 3 nights later, just after midnight. Gracie was in the training room with Zara, the former Olympic athlete who'd taken it upon herself to teach Gracie proper combat technique. They'd been sparring for an hour, Gracie's reflexes improving with each session, when the alarm system screamed to life. Lockdown protocol, Zara said immediately, her playful demeanor vanishing into pure predator. Stay behind me, don't engage, and for God's sake don't try to be a hero. They moved through the corridor at vampire speed, heading toward the central hall where the clan would gather. Other vampires emerged from various rooms. Theodore with an ancient sword, Ivy carrying what looked like modified assault rifles. Lucas already coordinating defensive positions through a tactical headset. Dorian stood at the center of the hall, silver eyes blazing with cold fury. Victor's people breached the outer perimeter. 6 vampires, heavily armed with silver weapons. They're not trying to be subtle, this is a direct assault. How did they get past the security? Celine demanded, appearing beside him with supernatural speed. Inside help, Dorian said grimly. Someone disabled the outer sensors. We have a traitor in the clan. The words sent a chill through the assembled vampires. Gracie saw the shock and anger ripple through the group. Family didn't betray family. Not like this. Defend the estate, Dorian commanded. Lucas, take the eastern approach. Selene western. I'll handle the main entrance. Everyone else, protect the newborn, and sweep for the traitor. If Victor's people get inside, Gracie is their primary target. I can fight, Gracie protested, even as Zara and Theodore positioned themselves protectively around her. I'm not helpless. You're 15 days old and Victor's people are trained vampire killers, Dorian said, his tone allowing no argument. Stay alive, Gracie, that's how you help. Then he was gone, moving toward the main entrance with Celine and Lucas following. The remaining vampires formed a protective circle around Gracie, weapons ready, every sense alert. I hate this, Gracie muttered. I'm a doctor. I should be preparing to treat injuries, not hiding like a child. You're a newborn, Theodore corrected gently, his Renaissance-era sword looking perfectly natural in his hands. There's no shame in accepting protection when you need it. Dorian would never forgive himself if you were harmed. Or us, Ivy added, checking her weapons with practiced efficiency. The king made it clear letting anything happen to you would be unwise. They waited in tense silence, vampire hearing picking up sounds of combat from outside. Glass breaking, metal clashing against metal. A scream that was abruptly cut off. Gracie's hands trembled with adrenaline and useless fear. Then Isaiah appeared, moving through the shadows like he was made of them. He pulled out his phone and typed rapidly, showing the screen to Theodore. Traitor identified. Nathan. He's heading toward the blood storage with explosives. Nathan? Theodore's expression darkened. He's been with us for 30 years. Why would he betray Dorian now? Isaiah typed again. Victor promised him territory. Ambition makes fools of us all. Blood storage is on the lower level, Zara said. If he destroys it, we lose our entire supply. We'd be forced to hunt humans or starve. Take Gracie to Dorian's private quarters, Theodore commanded. Highest security, reinforced walls. Isaiah and I will handle Nathan. I'm coming with you, Gracie said. The words came out before she could stop them. Absolutely not, Theodore said. Nathan's planning to blow up blood storage, Gracie argued. Medical supplies, refrigeration equipment, months of carefully maintained inventory. I know that facility, I've been training there. I can help minimize damage or save what we can if... An explosion rocked the castle. The floor beneath them shuddered, dust raining from ancient ceiling beams. The sound came from below, exactly where the blood storage was located. He did it early, Zara cursed. We need to assess damage now. They ran, vampire speed carrying them down staircases and through corridors that Gracie was just beginning to memorize. Smoke billowed from the lower level, acrid and chemical. The door to the blood storage hung off its hinges, flames licking at the wooden frame. Inside was chaos. Refrigeration units were destroyed, their contents spilled across the floor in spreading pools of red. The medical equipment Gracie had been training with was scattered and broken, and in the center of the destruction stood Nathan, a vampire Gracie vaguely recognized from the clan gathering, now holding a silver knife and a detonator. Stay back, he said, his voice shaking. I don't want to hurt anyone else, but Victor promised me Boston territory. After centuries of serving, I deserve more than scraps. You deserve nothing, Theodore said coldly, his sword raised. You betrayed your king, endangered your clan, and destroyed resources we all depend on. Victor used your ambition against you, Nathan. He'll kill you the moment you're no longer useful. Maybe, Nathan said, but at least I'll die as someone who tried to rise above their station instead of a loyal dog forever. He pressed the detonator. Nothing happened. Nathan looked down at the device in confusion, then up at Isaiah, who who stood in the shadows near the ruined door holding what looked like a small electronic jammer. "No," Nathan whispered. Theodore moved with centuries of speed and precision. His sword took Nathan's head before the traitor could react, the body crumbling to ash in seconds, the true death that came from decapitation. Gracie stared at the pile of ash that had been a vampire moments ago. Her first time witnessing vampire execution, and it was disturbingly quick and final. "Assess the damage," Theodore said, sheathing his sword. "Gracie, you know this facility. What can be salvaged?" Training overrode shock. Gracie moved through the wreckage with a doctor's practiced efficiency, checking refrigeration units, evaluating which blood bags had been compromised and which were still viable. Her vampire senses helped. She could smell which blood had been exposed to heat too long, which containers had been breached. 3 units are intact, she reported. Maybe 40% of our supply survived. The rest is contaminated or destroyed. The medical equipment is mostly gone. The explosion specifically targeted the high-value items. Nathan knew exactly what to destroy, Zara said bitterly. He helped set up this facility. He knew where to place charges for maximum damage. Footsteps echoed in the corridor, running, but controlled. Dorian appeared, his clothes torn and splattered with dark blood that wasn't his own. Celine and Lucas followed, equally disheveled but moving under their own power. "Victor's people are dead or fled," Dorian said. "We lost no one. Injuries are minimal." His silver eyes found the pile of ash on the floor. "Nathan?" "Traitor confirmed and executed," Theodore said. "He destroyed most of the blood storage before Isaiah jammed his second detonator. Gracie helped salvage what we could." Dorian's gaze moved to Gracie, and she saw the flash of anger there. "You were supposed to stay protected, not run toward explosions." "She helped save 40% of our supply," Zara defended. Her medical knowledge made the difference between total loss and partial recovery. Dorian was quiet for a long moment, his jaw tight. Finally, "We'll discuss this later. Right now, we need to secure the facility and contact our suppliers. 40% won't sustain the clan for long." The next 3 hours were organized chaos. Vampires worked together to put out remaining fires, catalog damage, and begin repairs. Gracie found herself falling into the familiar rhythm of triage, assessing, prioritizing, directing resources where they'd do the most good. By 4 a.m., the immediate crisis was contained. Dorian found Gracie in what remained of the medical bay, meticulously cleaning salvaged equipment. "You disobeyed direct orders," he said without preamble. "I made a judgment call," Gracie replied, not looking up from her work. "Theodore, Zara, and Isaiah needed medical expertise. I provided it. You put yourself in danger." "I'm always in danger," Gracie said, finally meeting his eyes. "Victor wants me dead to hurt you. That's not going to change whether I hide in a reinforced room or help save critical supplies. At least this way, I'm useful." Dorian moved closer, and Gracie could see the exhaustion around his eyes. Even ancient vampires could be worn down by combat and betrayal. "Nathan was with me for 30 years, he said quietly. "I trusted him. I gave him responsibilities, respected his counsel, and he sold us out for territorial promises Victor never intended to keep." "I'm sorry," Gracie said softly. "Betrayal by family hurts worst." "Yes," Dorian agreed, "which is why I can't lose you, Gracie. You're too new, too vulnerable, and Victor knows that hurting you hurts me. That makes you a target, and every risk you take makes you terrified," Gracie finished. "I know, but Dorian, I can't spend eternity wrapped in protection. I'm a doctor. Risk is part of what I do. I run toward danger to help people. It's literally my job description." Dorian reached out and cupped her face with one cold hand. "You're going to be the death of me." Again, Gracie leaned into the touch. "You're 473 years old. I think you can handle one stubborn newborn." "One stubborn, brilliant, impossibly brave newborn," Dorian corrected. Then, so quietly she almost didn't hear, "who I'm becoming far too attached to." The words hung between them, heavy with implication. "Dorian," Gracie started, but he stepped back. "Dawn is coming. You should rest. Tomorrow night, we debrief with the clan and plan our response. Victor crossed a line tonight. There will be consequences." He left before Gracie could respond, moving through the damaged corridor with his usual grace despite the exhaustion she'd seen in his eyes. Gracie cleaned the last piece of equipment and headed to her room as dawn approached. Her body felt the pull of day sleep, but her mind was racing with everything that had happened. Nathan's betrayal, the attack, Dorian's words, becoming far too attached to. She lay down on silk sheets and let the day sleep take her. But her last conscious thought was troubling. What happens when the king falls in love with the vampire he turned out of duty? And more importantly, what happens when she starts falling back? Chapter 7. Council Summons. 3 weeks and 2 days since Gracie became a vampire, and the formal summons arrived. She woke to find Dorian sitting in his usual chair, but tonight he held a piece of parchment that looked genuinely ancient, the kind of document that belonged in a museum display case, not in someone's hands. His expression was carved from stone. "What is it?" Gracie asked, sitting up. The day sleep still clung to her thoughts like cobwebs, but the tension radiating from Dorian cut through the fog. "Summons from the council," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "They've granted Victor's petition for territorial challenge. I'm required to appear before them in 5 days to defend my position as king of the Eastern Territories." Gracie's stomach dropped. What does that mean exactly? It means Victor will present evidence that I'm unfit to rule my injury, my reckless turning of you without clan approval, Nathan's betrayal as proof that my authority is weakening. The council will hear arguments from both sides, then render judgment. And if they rule against you? Dorian's silver eyes met hers. Then Victor becomes king. I lose my territory and authority. And you become a masterless vampire in a world where Victor wants you dead to prove a point. The casual way he said it made Gracie's blood run cold. There has to be something we can do, some way to fight this. There is, Dorian said. I appear before the council and prove I'm still capable of ruling. I demonstrate strength, control, and the continued loyalty of my clan. He paused. And I bring you with me. Me? Gracie's voice cracked slightly. Why would you bring me? I'm the reckless turning they're using against you. Exactly, Dorian said. Which is why you need to show them that turning you wasn't weakness. It was strategic brilliance. A vampire physician with modern medical knowledge, already demonstrating exceptional control despite being barely 3 weeks old, who saved the king's life through selfless action. You're an asset, Gracie. We just need to make the council see that. Gracie stood and paced the room, her movements still too fast, still requiring conscious control. I've never even met the council. What if I say something wrong? Do something to make things worse? Then we prepare, Dorian said simply. He stood and moved to her, stopping her frantic pacing with gentle hands on her shoulders. 5 days, Gracie. I'll teach you everything you need to know about council politics, proper etiquette, how to present yourself as valuable rather than vulnerable. Amara has agreed to testify about your medical potential. Celine will speak to your character. Even Isaiah wants to present evidence on your behalf. Isaiah? Gracie said, surprised. The silent vampire had acknowledged her. But she hadn't thought he considered her worth defending. He respects courage, Dorian said. And what you did stepping into that bullet, helping during the attack despite orders to stay safe, that's the kind of courage Isaiah values above almost everything else. Something warm unfurled in Gracie's chest. The clan was going to fight for her. People vampires she'd known for less than a month were willing to stand before the council and defend her right to exist. Thank you, she whispered. Don't thank me yet, Dorian said. The next 5 days are going to be intense. We leave for council headquarters in 4 days, which gives us minimal time to prepare. You'll need to master formal vampire etiquette, learn the names and positions of all 12 council members, and practice presenting yourself with confidence despite being a newborn. He released her shoulders and moved toward the door. Get dressed. We start immediately. The next 4 nights blurred together in a whirlwind of preparation. Theodore taught Gracie the formal language vampires used in council chambers, archaic, flowery, with specific phrases for addressing elders and acknowledging territorial authority. She stumbled over the pronunciation repeatedly, her modern medical vocabulary clashing with Renaissance-era formality. You must address the council as honored elders of the night, Theodore corrected for the 10th time. Not the council, or you guys, or heaven forbid folks. Formality matters, Gracie. These vampires remember when proper address meant the difference between alliance and execution. Selene drilled her on council politics, who held what territory, which members had alliances with Victor, which ones might be sympathetic to Dorian. Elder Katerina controls the Midwest territories, Selene explained, pointing to photographs of a severe-looking vampire with ice-white hair. She's old school, values tradition above innovation. She'll see your turning as reckless, unless we frame it through the law of blood debt. That law is older than she is, she can't argue against it without undermining her own traditional values. And him? Gracie asked, pointing to a photograph of a vampire who looked barely 30, with dark skin and gold eyes. Elder James, Selene said. Youngest council member, at only 200 years old. Progressive, interested in vampire-human cooperation. He'll be sympathetic to your medical work with Amara. Appeal to his vision of vampires integrating more successfully into modern society. Amara joined them on the third night, bringing case files and testimonials. I've documented every shift you've worked at. The sanctuary, she said, spreading papers across the table. 23 patients treated, 0 incidents of lost control, multiple diagnoses that other doctors missed because they didn't have your enhanced senses. You're already proving valuable to both vampire and human communities. Will the council care about that? Gracie asked. Elder James will, Amara said. And Elder Yuki from the Pacific Territories, she's been advocating for more vampire physicians for decades. 2 votes secured already. We only need 7 of 12 for Dorian to retain his position. On the 4th night, Dorian took Gracie to the training room for a different kind of preparation. The council will test you, he said, handing her formal clothes, a black dress that looked expensive enough to pay off her medical school loans. They'll push your control, try to provoke your newborn instincts, assess whether you're genuinely stable or a disaster waiting to happen. You need to be prepared for anything. Define anything, Gracie said warily. Dorian's expression was grim. They might cut themselves in front of you to see if you lose control. They might bring in a bleeding human. They might have Victor verbally attack you to test your emotional regulation. The council doesn't believe in gentle evaluations. Gracie's hands clenched into fists. That's barbaric. That's survival, Dorian corrected. They're protecting vampire society from unstable newborns who might expose our existence or go on killing sprees. Their methods are harsh, but they've kept our species hidden and safe for millennia. He moved closer, his silver eyes intense. Whatever they do, Gracie, you stay calm. You prove you're in control. You show them the same discipline you showed when you held that egg without breaking it, when you treated patients at the sanctuary, when you helped salvage blood storage while explosions were still going off. You are capable of this. And if I'm not? Gracie whispered. If I fail and they rule against you? Then we deal with the consequences together, Dorian said. But I don't believe you'll fail. You're the most disciplined newborn I've encountered in 4 centuries, Gracie. Trust yourself. The night before they left for council headquarters, the clan gathered for a final meeting. 36 vampires, now Nathan's betrayal and execution had reduced their numbers. They stood in the great hall, and Gracie felt the weight of their attention as Dorian addressed them. Tomorrow we travel to council headquarters, he said. Victor will present his challenge, and we will defend our territory and our choices. Some of you will accompany us as witnesses and character testimony. The rest will remain here to protect Thornwood Estate in case Victor attempts another attack while we're gone. Lucas stepped forward. The clan stands with you, my king. Victor's challenge is cowardice dressed as tradition. We'll show the council that your authority remains absolute. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembled vampires. Even Ivy, young and rebellious, nodded fiercely. Isaiah approached Gracie. Phone in hand, he typed. You saved our king. Now we save you. Family protects family. Gracie felt tears burning behind her eyes, vampire tears that still surprised her with their reality. Thank you, she managed. All of you. That night, Gracie couldn't sleep despite the day sleep trying to pull her under. She paced her room, reviewing everything Theodore had taught her, everything Selene had explained, practicing the formal phrases until they felt almost natural. A knock at her door broke her concentration. Dorian entered without waiting for permission, and Gracie saw the tension in every line of his body. You should be sleeping, he said. So should you, Gracie countered. But neither of us can turn off our minds, can we? Dorian moved to the window, looking out at the night-dark estate grounds. I've faced council judgment twice before, Once when I first claimed these territories. Once when another vampire challenged my authority 60 years ago. Both times I was confident, prepared, certain of my position. And now? Gracie asked softly. Now I'm terrified, Dorian admitted. Not for myself, I've lived long enough that losing territory wouldn't destroy me. But for you, Gracie. If the council rules against us, Victor becomes your enemy with legal authority. He could hunt you, hurt you, and no law would protect you. Gracie crossed the room and stood beside him at the window. Then we make sure the council rules in our favor. Dorian turned to face her, and in the candlelight his features looked almost vulnerable. A rare crack in the ancient vampire's carefully maintained control. I never should have turned you. I should have let you die in that parking lot rather than condemn you to this existence, to this danger. Don't, Gracie said firmly. Don't you dare regret giving me this life. Yes, it's complicated and dangerous and completely insane. But I'm alive, Dorian. I'm stronger than I've ever been. I'm learning to be a better doctor, and I'm part of something this clan, this family that I never had before. Don't take that away by wishing it never happened. You're extraordinary, Dorian said quietly. Do you know that? 3 weeks old, and you've already become essential to this clan's functioning. Amara says you're the most talented vampire physician she's encountered. Theodore says your mind is sharper than vampires 3 times your age. And I. He stopped, seemed to reconsider his words. You what? Gracie prompted. Her heart doing something complicated despite beating far slower than human normal. I find myself counting the hours until you wake each evening, Dorian said. Arranging my schedule around your training sessions. Looking for excuses to check on you. The sire bond explains some of that, but not all of it. Not the way I feel when you smile, or the pride I experience when you master something new, or the terror that grips me when you're in danger. Gracie's breath caught. Dorian, I know, he interrupted. It's inappropriate. You're newly turned, still adjusting, and I'm your sire. There's a power imbalance that makes any feelings I have problematic at best. But I wanted you to know before we face the council. If things go wrong, if Victor wins, I wanted you to know that turning you wasn't just duty. It became something more the moment you opened your eyes as a vampire and asked me why I'd saved you. The vulnerability in his voice. The careful way he was keeping distance between them, despite his confession. It broke something loose in Gracie's chest. I think about you constantly too, she admitted, which terrifies me because 3 weeks ago I didn't believe in vampires, and now I'm one, and my sire is this 400-year-old king, who's somehow become the most important person in my new existence. The sire bond doesn't explain the way my dead heart feels when you're near, or the way I feel safe when you're in the room, or... Dorian closed the distance between them in a blur of supernatural speed. His hands framed her face, cold and gentle, and his silver eyes searched hers. Tell me to stop, he said. Tell me this is just the bond, just newborn confusion, just... Gracie kissed him. It was awkward and desperate, and her fangs got in the way, but Dorian's response was immediate. He kissed her back with centuries of experience and weeks of restrained wanting, and Gracie felt something click into place like a bone setting after dislocation, like a diagnosis finally confirmed, like coming home to a place she'd never been. When they finally broke apart, both breathing unnecessarily hard, Dorian rested his forehead against hers. That was unwise, he murmured. Probably, Gracie agreed. Want to do it again? Dorian laughed, a genuine sound of joy that transformed his usually serious face. After the council. After we've secured our position and you're safe. Then, his thumb traced her lower lip carefully, avoiding her fangs. Then we explore what this is between us. Properly. Promise? Gracie asked. I swear it, Dorian said. By blood debt and sire bond, and whatever this feeling is that I haven't experienced in 200 years, I promise you, Gracie Vasquez, that we will have time to figure out what we mean to each other. Dawn approached, pulling at both of them with inexorable force. Sleep, Dorian said, guiding Gracie toward the bed. Tomorrow we travel to council headquarters. Tomorrow we fight for our future. Gracie lay down, and Dorian sat in his chair, his usual position. But everything felt different now after the kiss. After the confession. As day sleep claimed her, Gracie's last thought was, let the council come. Let Victor present his challenge. I have something to fight for now, beyond just survival. She had Dorian. She had the clan. She had a future worth defending, and she'd be damned if she let anyone take that away. Chapter 8. Judgment. The council headquarters existed in a place Gracie's human mind would have called impossible. They'd driven through the night Dorian, Gracie, Selene, Theodore, Isaiah, and Amara, packed into 2 armored vehicles that Lucas piloted with military precision. As dawn approached, they descended into an underground facility that sprawled beneath what appeared to be an abandoned government building in Washington, D.C. The council has maintained this location since 1791, Theodore explained as they walked through corridors carved from living rock. Deeper than any subway system, shielded from sunlight by hundreds of feet of earth. They meet here 4 times annually, or whenever territory disputes require immediate judgment. Gracie's enhanced senses cataloged everything: the age of the stone, the subtle scent of vampires who'd walked these halls for centuries, the hum of sophisticated technology hidden behind medieval architecture. The juxtaposition was jarring and somehow perfect for creatures who existed between ancient and modern worlds. They reached massive doors carved with symbols Gracie didn't recognize. Dorian paused, straightening his formal coat black, expensive, with subtle embroidery that probably signified his royal status. He looked every inch the king tonight, powerful and composed. "Remember everything we practiced," he said quietly to Gracie. Formal address, controlled responses, no emotional outbursts regardless of provocation. "Victor will try to break your composure. Don't let him." "I won't," Gracie promised, smoothing her own formal dress, black silk that Selene had selected, elegant without being flashy. "I'm ready." Dorian's hand found hers briefly, a quick squeeze of cold fingers that communicated everything he couldn't say aloud. Then the doors opened, and they entered the council chamber. The room was vast, circular, with 12 thrones arranged in a semicircle. Each throne held a vampire who radiated age and power like heat from a forge. Gracie recognized them from the photographs Selene had shown her, but pictures hadn't captured the sheer presence they commanded. Elder Katerina, ice-white hair and eyes like frozen silver. Elder James, young-looking with gold eyes that tracked Gracie with interest. Elder Yuki, Japanese features and an aura of serene danger. 9 others, each ancient and powerful, each holding the fate of territories in their immortal hands. And standing opposite Dorian's delegation, Victor. He was handsome in the way poisonous things were: beautiful sharp features, platinum hair, eyes that glowed red instead of silver. A bad sign, Gracie remembered Theodore saying. Red eyes meant age and power, and a predatory nature that even other vampires found excessive. 3 vampires flanked Victor, all radiating hostility. Gracie recognized none of them, but their body language screamed loyalty to Victor and contempt for Dorian. "King Dorian Thorne," Elder Katerina's voice rang out with formal authority. "You stand before the council to answer challenge from Victor Cross regarding your fitness to rule the Eastern Territories. Do you accept the terms of this judgment?" "I do, honored elders of the night," Dorian said, his voice carrying perfectly through the vast space. "And I present my clan's testimony in defense of my continued authority." "Victor Cross," Elder Katerina continued, "present your grievances." Victor stepped forward with a predator's grace. "Honored elders, I challenge Dorian Thorne's fitness to rule on 3 grounds. First, he was injured by human hunters, proof his vigilance has weakened, and his territory is insecure. Second, he turned a human without clan approval or council notification, acting as a tyrant rather than a king who respects proper procedure. Third, his own clan has fractured. One of his trusted vampires betrayed him, demonstrating that his authority no longer commands absolute loyalty. The accusations hung in the air like daggers. "Each point is valid under territorial law," Elder Katerina said. "King Dorian, your response?" Dorian stepped forward, and Gracie felt the shift in his energy. This was the vampire who'd ruled for centuries, who commanded through presence as much as authority. "Honored elders, I address each accusation directly. First, I was injured through strategic deception by Victor himself, who planted a false informant to lure me into ambush. The injury occurred not from carelessness but from deliberate assassination attempt. An attack that would have succeeded if not for the intervention of Dr. Gracie Vasquez, who is present tonight." He gestured toward Gracie, and suddenly 12 ancient vampires were staring at her with predatory focus. She forced herself to remain still, controlled. meeting their gazes without submission or fear. Second, Dorian continued, I turned Dr. Vasquez under the law of blood debt, the oldest law our species recognizes. She took a blessed silver bullet meant for my heart, dying to save my life despite not knowing what I was. That sacrifice created an obligation that supersedes normal protocol. To not turn her would have violated laws far older than council procedure. Elder Katarina's expression remained neutral, but Elder James leaned forward with interest. Third, Dorian said, his voice hardening, Nathan's betrayal was orchestrated by Victor, who exploited one vampire's ambition to destabilize my territory. His treachery was discovered and dealt with according to our laws. The remaining 36 members of my clan stand unified, as evidenced by those who accompanied me tonight. Pretty words, Victor interrupted, his red eyes blazing. But they don't change facts. You were vulnerable, you acted without consultation, and your territory weakened under your rule. I offer the council an alternative: grant me Eastern territories, and I will rule with the strength and decisiveness Dorian has lost. Strength? Celine's voice cut through the chamber like a whip. You call assassination and manipulation strength? You're a coward who couldn't challenge Dorian directly, so you tried to murder him from ambush. Witness Celine, Elder Katarina said sharply. You will address the council, not Victor directly. Celine bowed her head in acknowledgement. Honored elders, forgive my outburst. I request permission to testify regarding Dr. Vasquez's character and value to our clan. Granted, Elder Katarina said. Celine stepped forward. I've served under 3 kings across 2 centuries, Dr. Vasquez, despite being barely 4 weeks old, has demonstrated discipline and control I've never witnessed in a newborn. She works at the sanctuary, treating both vampire and human patients without incident. She helped salvage critical supplies during Victor's attack on our estate. She has integrated into our clan with respect for hierarchy and genuine desire to contribute. Turning her wasn't weakness, it was recognition of extraordinary potential. I would also testify, Amara said, stepping forward. Honored elders, I am Dr. Amara Okonkwo, and I've been training Dr. Vasquez in vampire medicine. She has treated 47 patients in 4 weeks with 0 loss of control. Her medical knowledge combined with vampire-enhanced senses makes her uniquely valuable. Vampire physicians are rare, maybe 15 in all of North America. Dr. Vasquez could become one of our most skilled, given time and proper development. Elder Yuki spoke for the first time, her voice like silk over steel. Dr. Vasquez, approach. Gracie's heart-slow vampire rhythm kicked up slightly. She walked forward, conscious of every movement, every breath, 36 pairs of vampire eyes watching her progress. You are quite young, Elder Yuki observed. 28 human years, 4 weeks vampire. Why should the council view you as asset rather than liability? Gracie had practiced this moment with Theodore dozens of times. Formal language, clear reasoning, demonstrate value without arrogance. Honored elder, she said, I offer 3 things to vampire society. First, modern medical expertise that can improve vampire health and safety. Second, the ability to move within human medical communities without suspicion, providing intelligence and resources to vampire populations. Third, a bridge between human and vampire worlds. I remember humanity recently enough to help vampires understand modern human society, while possessing vampire abilities to serve our kind effectively. And your control? Elder Yuki pressed. Can you demonstrate it? However the honored elders wish to test me, Gracie said steadily. Elder Yuki withdrew a small silver knife and drew it across her own palm. Dark vampire blood welled up, and the scent hit Gracie like a physical force. Her fangs descended automatically, hunger roaring to life in her veins, every predatory instinct, screaming feed, take, drink. Gracie closed her eyes, counted to 10, breathed unnecessarily, focused on Ruth's face, on Dorian's trust, on everything she'd worked for over 4 weeks of discipline and training. When she opened her eyes, her fangs were retracted and her hands were steady. Impressive, Elder Yuki said softly. The cut on her palm had already healed. You may return to your position. Victor laughed, a harsh, mocking sound. One parlor trick doesn't prove fitness. She's a newborn playing at control while her sire watches. Test her properly, honored elders. Bring in a bleeding human and see how long her discipline lasts. That would be excessive, Elder James said, sharply. We've seen sufficient evidence of her control. Have we? Victor challenged. Or are you also charmed by Dorian's pet project that you're willing to overlook the danger she represents? Newborns are unstable. They expose our existence. They kill recklessly. They save kings from assassination. Isaiah's voice cut through the chamber. Gracie whirled around in shock. Isaiah never spoke, couldn't speak, his tongue cut out before his turning. But he was speaking now, his voice rough from disuse and damage but absolutely clear. I have not spoken in 178 years. Isaiah continued, each word deliberate. I took a vow of silence after my turning, believing I had nothing worth saying. But tonight, I break that vow. Dr. Gracie Vasquez has more courage in 4 weeks than Victor has demonstrated in 3 centuries. She ran toward danger to save a stranger. She helped protect our clan during attack. She works to heal rather than harm. If the council rules against King Dorian because he honored blood debt by turning her, then our laws mean nothing. The chamber fell into absolute silence. Finally, Elder Katarina spoke. Isaiah, of Thornwood clan. Your testimony carries significant weight, given your sacrifice in delivering it. The council acknowledges your words. She turned her frozen gaze to Victor. Your challenge rests on 3 accusations. The first, that King Dorian was injured, is accurate but irrelevant, as the injury came from your orchestrated ambush. We do not reward assassination attempts with territory. The second, that he turned without permission, is superseded by blood debt law. The third, that his clan has fractured, is disproven by the unified testimony we've witnessed tonight. Elder Katarina looked to her fellow council members. I call for judgment. All in favor of maintaining King Dorian Thorne's authority over Eastern territories. 8 hands rose: Elder Katarina, Elder James, Elder Yuki, and 5 others. The council has ruled, Elder Katarina declared. King Dorian Thorne maintains his territory and authority. Victor Cross, your challenge is denied. Furthermore, evidence of your assassination attempt and manipulation of Nathan qualifies as interference in another king's territory. You are fined 1/3 of your holdings and forbidden from entering Eastern territories for 50 years. Victor's red eyes blazed with fury. This isn't over, Dorian. You've made a powerful enemy tonight. I made that enemy when I refused to sanction hunting humans like cattle, Dorian said coldly. Your threats don't frighten me, Victor. Neither does your ambition. Stay out of my territory, or next time I'll bring evidence of worse than assassination attempts. Victor and his vampires left the chamber, their exit radiating promises of future violence, but they were leaving, and Dorian had won. The council dismissed them, and Dorian's delegation returned through the stone corridors toward the surface. Gracie felt like she was floating, barely processing that they'd survived, that the council had ruled in their favor. As they reached the vehicles, Dorian pulled her aside into a private corridor. You were perfect, he said. And the pride in his voice made Gracie's undead heart do something complicated. Every answer, every demonstration of control, perfect. Isaiah spoke, Gracie said, still processing that miracle. He broke a vow of silence to defend me. Because you're worth defending, Dorian said. He cupped her face with both hands, silver eyes intense. 4 weeks ago, I thought turning you was the biggest mistake I'd ever made. Tonight, I realized it might be the best decision of my 4 centuries. You're extraordinary, Gracie Vasquez. And I. Gracie kissed him, cutting off whatever formal declaration he'd been building toward. This kiss was different from their first, more confident, more certain, loaded with the relief of survival and the promise of a future they'd just secured. When they broke apart, Dorian smiled. We should return to Thornwood Estate. The clan will want to celebrate, and you have medical training with Amara tomorrow night. Tomorrow, Gracie agreed. But tonight, I just want to be grateful we survived. They drove back through the night as dawn approached, Gracie's head resting on Dorian's shoulder while he absently played with her hair. The gesture was intimate and domestic, and completely at odds with the ancient vampire king who just defended his territory before the council. As they pulled up to Thornwood Estate, the clan emerged to greet them 36 vampires who'd become family, who'd testified and fought and believed in her despite her being a 4-week-old newborn. The king has returned, Lucas called out, and the clan erupted in celebration. They gathered in the great hall, blood wine flowing freely, stories of the council judgment being told and retold with increasing dramatic embellishment. Gracie found herself at the center of attention, accepting congratulations and gratitude from vampires who'd been strangers a month ago. Ivy hugged her carefully, aware of Gracie's still developing control. "You did good, Doc. Really good." Theodore nodded approvingly. "Your formal address was flawless. I'm impressed." Isaiah approached last, and Gracie saw the strain in his face, speaking after nearly 2 centuries of silence had cost him. He typed on his phone. "Thank you for giving me something worth breaking my vow for." Gracie hugged him, feeling his surprise and then his careful return of the embrace. As the celebration continued into the hours before dawn, Gracie found Dorian watching from the edge of the gathering. She joined him, and they stood together observing their clan, their family, celebrating survival and victory. "What happens now?" Gracie asked. "Now we live," Dorian said simply. "You continue your medical training. We rebuild the blood storage Nathan destroyed. We prepare for whatever Victor attempts next, because he won't accept defeat gracefully. We exist, Gracie, in whatever complicated, dangerous, beautiful way vampires exist." "And us?" Gracie asked quietly. "What do we do about whatever this is between us?" Dorian was silent for a moment, then, "I've lived 473 years. I've seen empires rise and fall, watched human society transform from Renaissance courts to digital revolution. I've loved once, and lost her to the weight of eternity. I thought I was done with feeling anything beyond duty and obligation." He turned to face Gracie fully. "Then you stepped into a bullet for me. You died in a parking lot saving a stranger, and I couldn't let you go. I told myself it was blood debt, that I was simply honoring ancient law. But the truth is, I wanted to save you. I wanted you in my existence. And now that you're here, I find myself hoping that I'll stay," Gracie finished. "That whatever we're building survives beyond the crisis, beyond the sire bond, beyond vampire politics and territory disputes." "Yes," Dorian said. "Exactly that." Gracie took his hand, cold vampire skin against cold vampire skin, but the touch felt right. "I'm not going anywhere, Dorian. You gave me a second life, a purpose, a family, and somewhere in there you became—" She struggled for words. "You became home. Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense," Dorian said, pulling her close. "Welcome home, Dr. Vasquez. Welcome to eternity." As dawn approached and the clan began dispersing to their day sleep chambers, Gracie and Dorian returned to her room. Their room now, she realized, as Dorian settled into his chair not as a guard but as a companion. Gracie lay down on silk sheets, and for the first time since waking as a vampire, she felt completely at peace. She'd lost her human life in a parking lot. She'd gained something else entirely: immortality, power, purpose, family, and a 400-year-old vampire king who looked at her like she was the most precious thing in his very long existence. "I love you," Gracie said as day sleep began pulling her under. The words came out drowsy but sincere. "I know it's fast and probably crazy, but I love you, Dorian Thorne." "I know," Dorian said softly. "I've known since you held that egg without breaking it, and looked so proud of yourself. I love you too, Gracie. Sleep now. We have eternity to explore what that means." Gracie slept, and dreamed of blood and medical journals and silver eyes that glowed in darkness. She dreamed of a future that stretched forward impossibly far, full of dangers she'd learned to face and joys she hadn't discovered yet. She dreamed of a parking lot where she'd made a choice that changed everything. And she dreamed of Ruth, who would be waiting when Gracie finally gained enough control to visit, when she could hug her grandmother without fear of crushing fragile human bones, when she could explain that she'd died and come back different, but still herself, still the granddaughter who'd been raised to help others regardless of cost. The sun rose over Thornwood Estate, and Gracie Vasquez, doctor, vampire, and savior of kings, rested in the arms of day sleep, protected by stone walls and ancient magic, and the love of a vampire who would burn the world to keep her safe. She took a deadly bullet meant for the vampire king, and he gave her eternity in return. Some debts can only be repaid with forever.